In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the Teltan Union held sway over hundreds of worlds, uniting over 300 species in a fragile peace. The Union's influence spanned systems, with trade routes and treaties binding cultures that had once been isolated from one another. Yet, amid the countless civilizations that populated the galaxy, one stood apart: humans, or rather the legend of humans, for they were believed to be nothing more than a myth. Stories of their existence had been passed down through generations, whispered in hushed tones, often dismissed as old folklore. The legend claimed that humans were once the most advanced species in the galaxy, capable of feats that bordered on the miraculous. They were said to have harnessed technologies so powerful that they could alter the very fabric of space-time, and some believed they had even achieved immortality. However, no one had ever seen them. There were no records, no confirmed sightings, only the remnants of tales scattered across the ages. Some species worshipped them as gods, while others scoffed at the idea, calling it a fairy tale for the gullible. Dralnor, a young historian from the Arthas Dominion, belonged to the latter group. He had spent years researching the galaxy's greatest civilizations, and had never once found anything credible to support the human myth. To him, the legend of humans was nothing more than a convenient story used by primitive cultures to explain the unexplainable. Yet, there was something about the mystery that intrigued him, something that made him keep coming back to the subject, even though he considered it a dead end. His fascination only deepened when an archaeological team from the Outer Rim reported the discovery of an unusual artifact on a barren, uninhabited planet. The artifact was a small, intricate object, emitting an energy signature unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Its design did not match any known species, and its purpose remained a mystery. When the team brought it to Dralnor's attention, he couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement, though he told himself it was just the thrill of the unknown. The object hummed with a soft, rhythmic pulse, as though it were alive. Dralnor and his team analyzed it for days, running countless tests, but none could determine its origin. The materials used to craft it were foreign, unfamiliar to even the most advanced databases of galactic alloys. Some of Dralnor's colleagues began to whisper that it might be human in origin, but he dismissed the idea immediately. To him, the human myth was too far-fetched to be true, no matter how strange the artifact seemed. Yet, as the days passed, Dralnor found it harder and harder to shake the feeling that this artifact was different. There was an inexplicable sense of intrigue about it, as though it had been waiting for them to find it. Despite his skepticism, he couldn't deny that the object possessed a strange allure, as if it held answers to questions no one had yet thought to ask. He buried himself in research, poring over ancient texts, hoping to find any reference to an artifact like this one. As Dralnor's obsession with the artifact grew, so did the rumors among his colleagues. The possibility that they had discovered something of human origin spread like wildfire throughout the academic community. Debates erupted in universities across the galaxy, with some scholars declaring the discovery the most significant in galactic history, while others dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. The Teltan Union's central government, however, remained silent on the matter, wary of stirring public interest in the ancient human myths. The Teltan Council, the ruling body of the Union, had always downplayed stories of humans. For centuries, they had gone to great lengths to discredit any claims of human existence, fearing the destabilizing effect such a discovery might have on the galaxy's political order. Humans, if they had ever existed, were said to possess technology far beyond anything the Union could muster. If their artifacts were found, it could spark a race for power that would tear the galaxy apart. Thus, any mention of human relics was quickly silenced. Undeterred by the Council's indifference, Dralnor pressed on. He became convinced that the artifact was the key to uncovering a hidden truth about the galaxy's past. His research led him to an ancient collection of texts, written in a dead language that few could translate. With the help of a linguistic AI, he managed to decipher a portion of the texts. To his astonishment, they referenced a race that had disappeared long before any known species had achieved spaceflight, a race that could manipulate reality itself. The texts spoke of monuments scattered across the galaxy, left behind by this ancient race. These monuments, it was said, held knowledge that could unlock the deepest mysteries of the universe. Dralnor couldn't help but draw parallels between these descriptions and the myths of humans. The idea seemed preposterous, but the more he read, the more the pieces began to fall into place. Could humans have been this ancient race, leaving behind clues for those daring enough to seek them? The thought consumed him, and Dralnor found himself staying up late into the night, poring over star charts and ancient records, searching for any trace of the so-called monuments. He knew that if he could find one, it might provide definitive proof of humanity's existence. But there was one problem. The Teltan Council had strict laws forbidding exploration of certain regions of space, areas long believed to be off-limits due to dangerous anomalies. And, as fate would have it, the star charts seemed to suggest that these monuments lay hidden in just such a forbidden zone. Despite the risks, Dralnor knew he had to follow the clues. The discovery of this artifact was too important to ignore. If the myths were true, it could change everything: the balance of power in the galaxy, the understanding of history, and even the future of all known species. But Dralnor also knew that such knowledge would come with consequences, and there were those in power who would stop at nothing to ensure that the truth about humans remained buried. Dralnor had a choice. He could let the artifact be forgotten, leaving the mystery unsolved, or he could take the first step on a journey that might change the galaxy forever. He chose the latter. With a small team of trusted colleagues, he began preparing for an expedition into the unknown, determined to uncover the truth behind the legend of humans. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the myth of the lost civilization was about to be tested like never before. The discovery of the artifact had spread rapidly across the academic community, igniting debate and controversy at every level of Teltan society. Dralnor, once a relatively unknown historian, was thrust into the galactic spotlight. His colleagues, once skeptical of his interest in human myths, now clamored to see the artifact for themselves. Scholars from every corner of the Teltan Union sent requests to collaborate, while others called for further investigation into the artifact's origins. Yet, amid the growing excitement, a darker cloud loomed overhead: the Teltan Council itself. For centuries, the Council had ruled the Teltan Union with an iron grip, ensuring stability across the galaxy. The Council prided itself on maintaining order, and any discovery that threatened the status quo was swiftly silenced. The human myth had always been one such danger. In the Council's view, it was a relic of a bygone era, a tale that could ignite unrest among the masses. Humanity's supposed technological superiority was a direct threat to the power balance that the Council had worked tirelessly to preserve. Chancellor Vrex, the head of the Council, was particularly concerned. Vrex was an imposing figure, known for his ruthless pragmatism and commitment to control. He had risen to power by outmaneuvering rivals and suppressing dissent, and now he saw the human myth as yet another challenge to his rule. The rumors surrounding Dralnor's discovery were already causing unease among the galactic elite. Some feared that the artifact could lead to a resurgence of interest in the legend of humans, which in turn could destabilize the Union. At an emergency meeting of the Council, Vrex made his position clear. "We cannot allow this to continue," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "The human myth is a threat to the stability of our Union. If Dralnor's discovery is allowed to spread unchecked, it will fuel the flames of rebellion and disorder." His words were met with nods of agreement from the other Council members. They had long known that the myth of humans was dangerous, but now the situation had escalated. The discovery of an artifact with unknown origins, and one so powerful, was too great a risk. The Council's first move was to issue an official statement dismissing the artifact as nothing more than an anomalous relic. They declared that there was no evidence to support any connection to humans, and warned against the irresponsible spread of baseless rumors. This move, they hoped, would quell the growing public interest in the subject. Yet, despite the Council's efforts, the statement only fueled more speculation. The very fact that the council was addressing the myth of humans gave it legitimacy in the eyes of many. Dralnor, of course, was not surprised by the council's denial. He had expected resistance from the very beginning, knowing full well how fiercely the ruling body guarded their version of history. However, what he hadn't anticipated was the intensity of the backlash. Within days of the council's statement, Dralnor found himself facing accusations of fabricating evidence and manipulating data. His reputation, carefully built over years of research, was being systematically dismantled by a campaign of disinformation orchestrated by the council. Colleagues who had once supported him began to distance themselves. His funding was revoked, his research papers discredited, and his communications monitored. It was clear that the council intended to erase his work from the public consciousness, along with any hope of exploring the artifact's origins. Dralnor, though disheartened, was not defeated. He knew that the council feared the truth and that their actions were proof of the artifact's significance. While Dralnor navigated the political fallout, the artifact itself became a target of the council's more direct interference. One morning, Dralnor arrived at his laboratory to find that the artifact had been confiscated by agents of the council. They claimed it was being moved to a secure facility for further study, but Dralnor knew better. He understood that the artifact was likely to disappear into a black vault, never to be seen again. The council wanted it buried, along with any hope of uncovering humanity's secrets. Undeterred, Dralnor reached out to his most trusted allies, those who had been with him since the beginning. Together, they devised a plan to continue their research in secret. The council could take the artifact, but they could not take what Dralnor had learned. He had already collected extensive data out of the artifact, and that knowledge could be used to trace its origins. With or without the object, Dralnor knew that the map of stars it had projected held the key to something far greater than the council could understand. Word of Dralnor's continued defiance began to spread among the underground academic circles. Rebel scholars, long opposed to the council's oppressive rule, reached out to offer their support. These scholars had been researching human myths in secret for years, gathering fragments of knowledge from across the galaxy. They believed that the truth about humanity was being systematically suppressed, and they saw Dralnor's discovery as the first real breakthrough in centuries. Together, they formed a clandestine network dedicated to uncovering the lost secrets of human civilization. As the group grew, so did their resolve. They knew that the council's stranglehold on information could not last forever. The truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it was buried. Dralnor, though now operating in the shadows, was more determined than ever to follow the trail left by the artifact. The star map it had revealed was unlike any known galactic chart, pointing to regions of space that had remained unexplored for eons. However, Dralnor and his allies faced a new danger. The council, having failed to suppress the discovery through public denial, turned to more covert methods. They dispatched operatives to track Dralnor's every move, seeking to eliminate the threat he posed. These agents were skilled in the art of infiltration, and Dralnor soon realized that his every step was being watched. His communications were intercepted, his travel restricted, and his allies threatened. In the face of mounting pressure, Dralnor made a bold decision. He knew that if he stayed within the confines of the Teltan Union, he would be caught. The Council's reach was too vast, their power too entrenched. If he wanted to uncover the truth about humanity, he would have to leave the Union altogether. It was a dangerous move, venturing into uncharted space beyond the protection of the Union's borders. But Dralnor had no choice. Gathering a small team of loyal researchers and engineers, Dralnor prepared for an expedition into the unknown. They secured an old research vessel, outfitting it with stealth technology to avoid detection by the Council's patrols. Their destination? The farthest reaches of the galaxy, where the star map from the artifact pointed, a place the Council had long forbidden anyone to explore. As they boarded the ship, Dralnor felt the weight of the journey ahead. They were venturing into a region of space that had been forgotten by history, a place where the answers to the human legend might finally be uncovered. But he also knew that they were not alone. The Council would stop at nothing to prevent them from reaching their goal. With the fate of the truth hanging in the balance, Dralnor and his crew set course for the edge of the galaxy, ready to face whatever awaited them in the dark. Dralnor's vessel, the Explorer, hummed with quiet anticipation as it moved through the void, carrying its small crew further away from the Teltan Union than any of them had ever ventured before. The journey into the Forbidden Zone had been long and perilous, made even more dangerous by the Council's constant surveillance. The stealth modifications to the ship had helped them evade detection, but everyone on board knew it was only a matter of time before the Council realized their disappearance. The crew was a diverse group, each member handpicked for their skills and loyalty to the cause. There was Lin, a brilliant engineer who had retrofitted the Explorer for long-range travel and equipped it with cutting-edge technology. Kira, a seasoned navigator, was the best in the galaxy when it came to piloting through unknown territories. Beside them were Ralos, a former archaeologist with a deep knowledge of ancient civilizations, and Vokar, a security specialist who had once served as an elite operative in the Union's military. They were united by a single purpose: to uncover the truth about humanity. As they approached the edge of known space, the atmosphere on board grew tense. The Forbidden Zone was a region that had been off-limits for millennia, a vast expanse of uncharted systems where few dared to travel. Legends told of strange anomalies, powerful cosmic storms, and entire fleets that had vanished without a trace. It was said that only those with a death wish would dare cross its boundaries. But Dralnor and his crew were not deterred. The coordinates they had decoded from the artifact pointed to something hidden within this forsaken region, and they were determined to find it. The first few days in the Forbidden Zone were eerily calm. The stars shone brightly, and the ship's scanners detected nothing unusual. Still, everyone remained on high alert. They knew that the danger here wasn't always visible. The anomalies that haunted this part of space were known to appear without warning. Rifts in reality, energy fluctuations that could tear a ship apart, and gravity wells that defied explanation. Even the most advanced navigational systems couldn't always detect them in time. Dralnor spent most of his time poring over the star map from the artifact, studying the coordinates that had led them into this uncharted expanse. The map was ancient, older than any known galactic chart, and it hinted at places long forgotten. As they moved deeper into the zone, the patterns on the map began to shift subtly, guiding them toward what Dralnor believed was the key to the human legend. It was as if the map had been designed to respond to their presence, leading them to the next step in their journey. One evening, after days of silence, the ship's sensors picked up a faint signal. It was barely detectable, hidden beneath layers of cosmic interference, but it was unmistakably artificial. Kira immediately began working to decode the signal, and as the minutes ticked by, the crew gathered around the communications console, waiting with bated breath. When the signal finally came through, it wasn't what they had expected. It wasn't a distress call, nor a transmission from a long-lost ship. It was a recording, an ancient message that had been drifting through space for eons. The voice that spoke in the recording was distorted, but the language was unmistakable. It was human. The message was short, little more than a few words, but its implications sent chills through the crew. The key lies in the Temple of Ascendance. Beware the void. Dralnor's mind raced. The Temple of Ascendance? He had never heard of such a place, but it sounded eerily similar to the monuments mentioned in the ancient texts he had studied. And then there was the warning. Beware the void. The void. That name stirred something deep within him, an ancient fear tied to humanity's greatest secret. Determined to follow the lead, Dralnor instructed Kira to trace the source of the signal. It led them deeper into the Forbidden Zone, past a series of dense nebulae, and through a chaotic region of gravitational anomalies. As they traveled, strange things began to happen. The ship's systems flickered intermittently, and the crew reported hearing faint whispers, though there was no one else aboard. It was as if the very fabric of space was warping around them, twisting reality in ways they couldn't understand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Explorer emerged into a clearing in the nebulae. Before them was a massive structure, a floating temple, ancient and awe-inspiring, suspended in the void. Its design was unlike anything they had ever seen, with vast spires and intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer in the starlight. Dralnor immediately recognized it from the descriptions in the texts. This was the Temple of Ascendance, a monument built by the ancient race that had disappeared long before recorded history. The temple was colossal, its outer walls covered in glyphs and symbols that no one on the crew could decipher. It hovered in the dead of space, untouched by time, as though waiting for someone or something to find it. The closer they came to it, the more the ship's systems began to malfunction. Energy fluctuations rippled through the air, and Dralnor could feel a deep, inexplicable pull toward the structure. It was as if the temple itself was alive, calling to them. As they prepared to land on the temple's surface, Vokar voiced his concern. "We don't know what's in there," he said, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "It could be a trap." But Dralnor was resolute. He had come too far to turn back now. If the temple held the key to humanity's lost history, they needed to uncover it, no matter the danger. With a nod to his crew, he gave the order to land. The ship descended slowly, settling onto the temple's vast landing platform. The moment they stepped outside, the air felt different, charged with an ancient energy. The temperature was cooler, and the atmosphere seemed thick with history. The towering entrance to the temple loomed before them, carved from stone-like material that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Strange symbols glowed along the walls, their meaning lost to time. Dralnor felt a shiver of both excitement and fear as they approached. Inside the temple, the halls were vast and echoing, with walls lined with murals that depicted scenes of a civilization unlike anything they had ever known. The murals showed beings that looked human, engaged in activities that defied understanding, walking among stars, bending light and space to their will, and facing off against a dark, swirling force. Dralnor's heart pounded as he realized that this temple was more than just a monument. It was a record of the humans' rise to power and their desperate fight against something much greater than themselves. At the center of the temple, they found it, the heart of the structure, a chamber lined with crystalline consoles that hummed with barely contained energy. In the center stood a pedestal, and atop it rested a sphere of light, pulsing gently with a rhythm that matched the artifact they had found. As Dralnor stepped closer, the sphere flickered, and suddenly the room was bathed in holographic images, scenes of humanity's past, of battles fought in the stars, and of their ultimate defeat. The last image lingered in the air, the void, a swirling mass of darkness that devoured everything in its path. The warning from the recording echoed in Dralnor's mind: beware the void. Whatever the void was, it had been humanity's greatest adversary. And now, Dralnor feared, it was awakening once again. As the holographic images faded, the crew stood in stunned silence within the heart of the Temple of Ascendance. The last image, of the void swirling like a living nightmare, lingered in Dralnor's mind. He had seen evidence of humanity's incredible technological power in the ancient texts and myths. But this was different. It wasn't just a myth. Humanity had faced an enemy far greater than anyone had ever imagined. The void was not a metaphor. It was a force of destruction, and it was real. Dralnor approached the glowing sphere at the center of the chamber, its light pulsing softly. He could feel the energy emanating from it, like a heartbeat of the past. His mind raced as he tried to process the implications of what he had seen. The murals, the holograms, this temple wasn't just a monument, it was a warning. The beings depicted in the murals were unmistakably human, and the power they wielded was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But the fact that they had lost to the void was even more unsettling. Kira broke the silence first. What was that? Did humans really fight that thing? Her voice trembled, uncharacteristically shaken. She had always been the calm, collected navigator, but now she looked as if she had seen a ghost. Dralnor didn't have an answer, not yet. All he knew was that the ancient humans had battled the void and failed. The question now was, could it return? I think we've just uncovered the reason the Council has kept this part of history buried for so long, Dralnor replied, his voice somber. He knew that the Council's suppression of human myths wasn't just about maintaining control over the present. They had feared something ancient, something dangerous. The void wasn't just a story to scare children. It was real. And if the Temple's warning was accurate, it could be returning soon. Vokar, ever the practical warrior, scanned the chamber for threats. If humanity was wiped out by this void, what does that mean for us? He asked, his voice tense. What if this thing is still out there, waiting? The thought sent a chill through the crew. Vokar's question hung in the air, heavy with dread. They were standing in the remnants of a civilization that had once been the most powerful force in the galaxy, and it had been brought to its knees. If the void could destroy them, what chance did they have? Ralos, the archaeologist, examined the glyphs and murals more closely. His mind was racing as he pieced together fragments of what they had seen. Look at this, he called out, gesturing to a mural near the chamber's entrance. These images, they show the humans building something. It's hard to tell, but it looks like they were preparing for war. And this, he pointed to a massive structure depicted in the background of the mural. This could be their last stronghold. Dralnor's eyes widened. A stronghold? Could they have survived? He approached the mural, examining the details more closely. The structure was unlike anything they had ever encountered in the galaxy. Massive, fortified, and surrounded by fleets of ships. If it was humanity's last defense, perhaps remnants of their civilization still existed somewhere, hidden away, waiting for the right moment to reemerge. Or worse, perhaps they had perished, and all that was left was the memory of their defeat. Kira activated her scanner and tried to cross-reference the image with known star systems. The process took several minutes, the tension thickening as everyone waited for the results. Finally, the scanner beeped, and Kira's face paled. I've located the star system in the mural, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's in the outermost region of the Forbidden Zone, in a system that's completely off the charts. Ralos frowned. What do you mean off the charts? It doesn't exist on any official maps, Kira explained, staring at the data. The system is completely isolated. There's no record of any civilization there, no exploration logs, nothing. But it's there, and this temple points to it. Dralnor knew they had no choice. This system could hold the answers they needed, perhaps even the remnants of human technology. If they could find humanity's last stronghold, they might be able to uncover the truth about the void and prepare for what was to come. We need to go there, he said decisively, looking at each member of the crew in turn. Whatever the Council has hidden, we're not going to stop now. Vokar crossed his arms, his face a mask of concern. You realize that if we go there, we might be walking straight into a trap. This void, whatever it is, could still be active. Or worse, the Council might already know about it and be waiting for us. Dralnor nodded. I know the risks, but if humanity's final stronghold is out there, we need to find it. The Council fears this knowledge for a reason, and we have to know why. If we turn back now, we'll never get another chance. Reluctantly, the crew agreed. They were explorers, after all, and despite the fear gnawing at them, they were driven by curiosity, by the desire to know the truth. They had already uncovered more than anyone had in centuries, but the real answers still lay ahead, buried in the depths of the Forbidden Zone. The explorer took off from the temple's landing platform, its engines flaring as it lifted into the dark void of space. Dralnor and his team knew that they were heading toward unknown danger, but they had no other choice. The mysterious system that Kira had located was their next destination. It was isolated, hidden by the Council, and, if the murals were correct, home to humanity's last defense against the void. As the ship sped toward the coordinates, Dralnor couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The whispers in the temple, the flickering lights, and now this inexplicable pull toward the unknown. It all felt like they were stepping into a trap set by forces far beyond their understanding. Yet the weight of history compelled them forward. Whatever lay ahead, they were on a path that had been forgotten for millennia. As the explorer approached the star system Kira had identified, the atmosphere inside the ship grew thick with tension. The crew had spent hours in silence, each member lost in their thoughts, mentally preparing for what they might encounter. This system had no name, no records, no known history. It was a void in the galaxy's collective knowledge, a ghost system hidden by design. Dralnor was overwhelmed with the feeling that they were walking into a place forgotten by both time and purpose. The system's central star was dim, barely illuminating the small collection of planets that orbited it. As they drew closer, Kira activated the ship's long-range sensors, scanning for any signs of life, energy, or structures. The display filled with static, a strange interference blanketing the entire region. "This is odd," she muttered, adjusting the sensors. "It's like something is deliberately jamming our readings. I can't get a clear image of what's out there." "Keep trying," Dralnor replied, staring out at the faint light of the distant star. His fingers drummed restlessly on the armrest of his seat. Every instinct in his body told him they were close to something monumental, but the eerie silence of the system was unnerving. There was no radio chatter, no debris, no signs of life. Just emptiness, as if the system had been abandoned long ago. Lynn, the engineer, glanced up from her console, her face grim. "I'm detecting strange fluctuations in the ship's systems. We're getting power surges and disruptions I can't account for. It's almost like the closer we get, the more unstable everything becomes." "Can you compensate?" Dralnor asked. "I'll try, but I can't make any promises. Whatever is causing this interference is affecting more than just our sensors." As they approached the first planet in the system, a barren, rocky world with no atmosphere, Dralnor ordered a flyby. They had to be cautious. They couldn't afford to land without understanding what was happening. The planet's surface appeared lifeless, with deep scars across its surface, possibly from ancient impacts or seismic activity. But as they circled the planet, Kira suddenly gasped. "There!" she pointed at the display. "I'm picking up a faint energy signature. It's weak, but it's there." Dralnor leaned forward. "Where's it coming from?" Kira zoomed in on the source, revealing a small structure hidden in one of the planet's deepest craters. "It's difficult to tell what it is from this distance, but it's definitely artificial. The energy readings match nothing we've seen before." Vokar, standing behind her, scowled. "Could be a trap, something the Council left behind to catch anyone snooping around. Or it could be the last remnants of human technology," Dralnor countered. "We need to get closer." Against his better judgment, Vokar nodded. "Fine, but we go in ready for anything. I don't like this." The ship descended slowly, navigating through the planet's dense gravitational pull and approaching the structure in the crater. As they neared it, the details became clearer. The structure was ancient, its surface worn down by centuries of exposure. Yet, despite its age, it still hummed with a faint, almost ghostly energy. Lynn's eyes widened. "This architecture, it's similar to the temple. Could it be part of the same network?" "It must be," Dralnor said, his voice thick with awe. "We've found another human relic." They landed the ship a few hundred meters away from the structure, its towering spires casting long shadows across the crater's floor. The air on the planet was thin and freezing, forcing the crew to don their full environmental suits before stepping outside. As they approached the structure, the oppressive silence of the planet weighed on them. There were no sounds, no wind, no life, just the low hum of their suits' life support systems. The structure loomed above them, its surface covered in the same glyphs they had seen in the Temple of Ascendance. Dralnor placed his hand against the cold metal, feeling a strange vibration beneath his fingertips. "This place has been here for millennia, waiting for someone to find it," he whispered. Lynn examined the walls closely. "These glyphs, I think they're instructions. Maybe they explain how to activate whatever's still running inside." "Can you make sense of them?" Kira asked, her voice echoing slightly in her helmet. "Not entirely," Lynn admitted, "but I think I can get us inside." With a few careful adjustments, Lynn found a control panel hidden beneath a layer of dust and debris. After a moment of fiddling with the ancient interface, the doors to the structure slid open with a hiss. A gust of stale air rushed out, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of age and decay. The crew stepped inside cautiously, their lights cutting through the darkness. The interior of the structure was vast, far larger than it had appeared from the outside. Hallways branched off in multiple directions, each one lined with more of the mysterious glyphs. Strange, crystalline machines sat dormant in various chambers, their purposes lost to time. But the faint hum of energy persisted, guiding them deeper into the heart of the facility. As they ventured further, they entered a central chamber that took their breath away. In the center of the room stood a massive console, pulsating with the same light they had seen in the Temple of Ascendance. It was surrounded by towering pillars, each one inscribed with symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. And in the center of the console was a holographic map, one that looked disturbingly familiar. Rallo stared at the map, his voice barely above a whisper. This is a map of the galaxy, but these regions, they're not on any chart we know. Dralnor approached the map, his heart racing. It's showing us the locations of more human relics, more places like this one. This could be the key to uncovering the entire history of the human race. But why? Vokar asked, his eyes narrowing. Why would they leave all this behind, and what were they hiding from? As if in response to his question, the console flared to life, and a new hologram appeared, this time a figure. It was humanoid, but its features were blurred, distorted by time and the decay of the system. The figure spoke, its voice hollow and distant, but the message was clear. The void approaches. We must retreat. Our strongholds will remain until the day we return. Beware the darkness beyond the stars. Dralnor's blood ran cold. The message was ancient, but its warning was clear. The humans had fled from the void, leaving behind these relics, these strongholds, in the hope that one day they could return. But the void hadn't been defeated. It was still out there, waiting. And now, Dralnor realized with a sinking feeling, they were standing at the precipice of its return. The figure's hologram flickered and vanished, leaving the crew standing in stunned silence. The weight of the message hung in the air, thick with dread. Dralnor replayed the words over in his head. The void approaches. Beware the darkness beyond the stars. There was no mistaking it now. The human race had retreated, not been destroyed. But they hadn't been able to stop the void. Whatever it was, it had been a threat so great that even humanity, at the height of its power, had chosen to flee. Dralnor could feel the crew's unease radiating through the room. Vokar, his hand never far from his weapon, stood rigid, scanning the chamber for any signs of danger. Kira's eyes were fixed on the map, her face pale. "Do you think the void is still out there?" she asked quietly, as if speaking louder would somehow summon the ancient enemy. "I don't know," Dralnor replied, his voice tight. "But this message was meant for someone, for us, or whoever came after the humans. We have to assume the void is still a threat." Lynn was already busy at the console, her hands moving over the controls. "I'm trying to pull up more information from the system," she said. "There has to be more here. Maybe there are records of how the humans fought the void, or where they went after they left the galaxy." Kira shook her head, her brow furrowed in frustration. "Even if we find that information, what good will it do us? We're just a crew of 5. If the void is returning, we need to warn the galaxy, not chase after more human ruins." Dralnor knew she was right, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something vital they still needed to uncover. The answers to humanity's disappearance and the threat of the void were entwined, and if they didn't learn more, they might be flying blind into a storm far worse than they imagined. Just as Lynn accessed another set of files, a low rumble vibrated through the structure. It started faint, barely perceptible, but quickly grew louder. The lights in the room flickered, and the hum of energy they had heard earlier became a chaotic buzz. "What's happening?" Rallos asked, his eyes darting around the room in alarm. Vokar was already moving toward the door. "We need to get out of here, now." Before they could react, the map on the console flashed red, and the entire room was plunged into darkness. Alarms blared, and a mechanical voice echoed through the chamber in a language none of them could understand. "It's a fail-safe," Lynn shouted over the noise. The structure is shutting down. I don't know what triggered it, but we need to move. Dralnor didn't hesitate. Everyone, back to the ship. The crew bolted toward the exit, racing down the hallways they had come through. The structure around them groaned as if the weight of centuries was finally catching up to it. Strange shadows danced along the walls, and the oppressive silence of the planet outside was replaced by the deep rumbling of machinery failing. Kira's voice crackled through their comms. This place is falling apart. Whatever we did, it's destabilizing the entire structure. They burst out onto the planet's surface, just as a deep crack split the ground near the structure. Dust and debris flew into the air, and the towering spires of the facility began to sway precariously. Dralnor could see their ship in the distance, still intact. "Go! Get to the ship!" he shouted. Vokar was the first to reach the Explorer, slamming his fist against the hatch controls. The door slid open, and the crew piled inside, panting and covered in dust. Lynn raced to the cockpit, immediately beginning the launch sequence, as the ground beneath them trembled. "We need to leave before this whole place collapses," she warned, her voice strained. Dralnor strapped himself into the command chair as the ship lifted off the planet's surface. The facility they had just left was collapsing in on itself, the ancient technology failing in a spectacular fashion. Huge chunks of rock and metal broke off and crashed into the crater below. Whatever secrets the humans had left behind, they were now buried under the weight of a dying world. As they ascended into the upper atmosphere, the ship's systems went haywire. Warning lights flashed, and the sensors showed massive distortions in the space around them. "What now?" Kira groaned, fighting with the controls. "It's not the planet," Lynn said, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's the void." The words hit Dralnor like a punch to the gut. He stared at the display in front of him, showing a growing distortion just beyond the planet's orbit. It was a swirling mass of darkness, like the images they had seen in the temple. But this was no hologram. The void was real, and it was here. The swirling anomaly expanded rapidly, its inky blackness spreading out like a storm cloud blotting out the stars. "How is this possible?" Ralos whispered, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "We just triggered it, the void. It must have been dormant until now." "We woke it up," Dralnor said, his voice heavy with regret. "The humans weren't just warning us, they were containing it, keeping it sealed away. And now we've broken that seal." The crew was silent as they watched the void grow larger on the view screen. Tendrils of darkness began to reach out, twisting and coiling as if searching for something, searching for them. "We need to get out of here," Vokar said, his voice tight with urgency. "Engage the hyperdrive," Dralnor ordered, gripping the arms of his chair. "Get us as far away from this system as possible." Lynn worked frantically at the controls. "It's not that easy. The void's interference is messing with our systems. I'll need a few minutes to recalibrate." The ship rocked violently as one of the void's tendrils brushed against their shields. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engines faltered. "We don't have a few minutes," Vokar shouted. "Hold on," Kira said, forcing the ship into a steep dive. They narrowly avoided another tendril, which lashed out at them like a whip. The controls fought her, but she managed to keep them steady. "Almost there," Lynn muttered through gritted teeth. She entered the final command sequence, and with a sudden lurch, the ship's hyperdrive engaged. The stars outside blurred as they shot into faster-than-light travel, leaving the system and the void behind. For several tense moments, no one spoke. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound, a reassuring reminder that they were still alive. Dralnor finally exhaled, his hands trembling. "What the hell was that?" "The void," Kira whispered, her face pale. "It's real, and it's not just a story. It's a living force, and we just unleashed it." Dralnor sank back into his chair, his mind reeling from what had just happened. The legends were true. Humanity hadn't been destroyed. They had fled from something far worse. And now, after millennia of slumber, the void was awake once more. They had to warn the galaxy, but Dralnor feared that it might already be too late. The darkness beyond the stars had returned. The ship's lights flickered as the Explorer emerged from hyperspace, the crew still shaken from their narrow escape. Dralnor looked out at the vast emptiness of space, the stars distant and indifferent. For the first time in his life, Space felt less like an expanse of endless opportunity and more like a cold, isolating abyss. The void had changed everything. They were no longer just explorers. They were survivors. Lynn was the first to break the silence. "I've stabilized the systems, but the interference from the void left some lingering damage. It'll take time to repair, but we're functional for now." Dralnor nodded, his mind still racing. The crew had always been prepared for danger. Pirates, hostile alien races, even the occasional gravitational anomaly. But the void? This was something else entirely. It wasn't just a physical threat. It was a force of nature, something beyond the scope of their understanding. Vokar stood by the viewport, his arms crossed. "What do we do now? We can't go back to that system, and we're not prepared to fight something like the void." Kira, seated at her console, stared at the star map in front of her. "We need to warn someone, the Galactic Council or any faction that might listen. This is bigger than us." Dralnor sighed, rubbing his temples. "The problem is, no one will believe us. The legend of humans is already considered a myth by most of the galaxy. If we tell them we found an ancient human facility and accidentally unleashed the void, they'll call us mad." "They might call us mad," Ralos chimed in, "but they won't ignore us if we have proof. We need to go back to the temple, the first one we found. If there are any surviving artifacts or data there, it might be enough to convince them." Kira shook her head. "That system is under surveillance by the Galactic Council. If we go back, they'll lock us up for trespassing. And even if we did manage to sneak in, who's to say the Council hasn't already confiscated everything?" Dralnor mulled over the options, none of them good. They were stranded in a galaxy that had no idea the void was real, with no clear way to get the word out without risking imprisonment, or worse. "We need a middle ground," he said. "Someone who's not part of the Council, but has enough influence to get the message to the right people." Vokar's eyes narrowed, and his voice was cold. "You're thinking of the Syndicate, aren't you?" The Syndicate was a powerful group of intergalactic outlaws and mercenaries, operating outside the law but often possessing valuable intelligence. They had their fingers in every major conflict and trade route in the galaxy. Dralnor had dealt with them before, reluctantly, and he knew they were dangerous. But they were also pragmatic. If they saw value in the information, they might spread the word. "They're our best shot," Dralnor said. "They don't care about the Council's laws, and they've got the resources to move quickly. If we tell them the truth, they'll listen, especially if they think there's something to be gained." Kira frowned. "And what exactly do we offer them? This isn't just some ancient treasure hunt. The void isn't something they can exploit." "We offer them survival," Dralnor replied, his tone grim. "They won't be able to exploit the void, but they'll want to know how to avoid it. And if we can give them a way to keep their operations safe, they'll spread the warning." The room fell silent as the crew processed the plan. It wasn't ideal, and dealing with the Syndicate could easily backfire. But they had no other options. The galaxy had to know about the void, and this was the quickest way to spread the word. Ralos leaned back in his chair. "So, where do we find the Syndicate?" Vokar sighed. "I know of a contact. Name's Jaren. He operates out of the Metris cluster, a fringe system just outside of Council space. He's not exactly trustworthy, but he's high enough up in the Syndicate's hierarchy to get the word out. If we can convince him, it'll spread." Dralnor nodded. "Then that's our next move. Set course for the Metris cluster." As the ship's engines hummed to life, Kira glanced nervously at Dralnor. "What if we can't convince them? What if they think we're lying or worse, try to take the information for themselves?" Dralnor met her gaze. "We have to take that risk. The void is coming, and if the galaxy doesn't prepare, it'll be too late. We've already seen what it can do. We can't sit by and do nothing." With the coordinates locked in, the explorer shot into hyperspace, heading toward the lawless fringes of the galaxy. The journey would take several days, giving the crew time to recover from the shock of their recent encounter. But even as they tried to rest, the specter of the void loomed large in their minds. Dralnor retreated to his quarters, trying to quiet his thoughts. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The Syndicate was unpredictable, and even if they succeeded in warning them, the rest of the galaxy might still be too slow to act. But they had to try. There was too much at stake. In the quiet of his cabin, Drowner stared at the holomap of the galaxy on his display. The regions marked by the ancient human map seemed so distant, so impossible. And yet, they were all connected by one terrible truth. The void was real, and it was growing. A faint knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Kira stepped in, her expression serious. "We need to talk." "What is it?" Dralnor asked, already knowing her answer. "There's something we're not considering," she said, sitting across from him. "What if the humans are still out there? What if they're the only ones who know how to stop the void?" Dralnor sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's possible, but we don't know where they went. All we have are scattered ruins and legends. Even if they survived, they might be just as lost as we are." Kira leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Maybe. But if there's even the slightest chance they're out there, we have to find them. They fled the void once before. Maybe they have the key to stopping it for good." Dralnor considered her words. The humans had been the only race powerful enough to challenge the void. If they were still alive, they might hold the answers. But they were chasing ghosts. "First, we deal with the syndicate," he said. "Then, if we survive that, we'll start looking for the humans. It's a long shot, but it might be our only hope." Kira nodded, standing up. "One step at a time, then." As she left, Dralnor stared once more at the map, his resolve hardening. The galaxy was on the brink of a disaster it didn't even know existed, and the crew of the Explorer, misfits, outlaws, and dreamers, might be the only ones who could stop it. If they couldn't find a way to unite the galaxy against the coming darkness, no one would survive what lay ahead. The Metros cluster was a region notorious for its lawlessness, a collection of forgotten worlds on the edge of galactic civilization. Dralnor's stomach churned as the Explorer dropped out of hyperspace, the chaotic swirl of asteroid debris and derelict ships filling the viewport. This place was a den of wolves, and the crew of the Explorer was about to walk straight into their jaws. Vokar stood at the helm, his hands steady on the controls. "There it is," he said, pointing to a hulking, dilapidated space station orbiting a gas giant. The station, known as the Spire, was a trading hub for all manner of illicit activities, piracy, smuggling, and black market dealings. Its skeletal structure looked like it was falling apart, held together by little more than rust and greed. Dralnor frowned, his nerves on edge. "This place is a death trap. Are you sure your contact can be trusted?" Vokar gave a humorless laugh. "Trust? No. But Jaren values his own skin. If the void is as dangerous as we think, he won't ignore us." Kira, sitting at the communications console, glanced at the rest of the crew. "Let's just hope he doesn't decide to sell us out for a quick profit. The syndicate isn't exactly known for its loyalty." Lynn had her eyes glued to the scanners, which were lighting up with a mess of signals and incoming transmissions from ships that clearly didn't follow galactic law. "I'm detecting dozens of vessels in the vicinity, most of them armed to the teeth. Any wrong move, and we're vaporized." Dralnor nodded. "Keep our shields up, but don't power weapons. We don't want to look like a threat." As they approached the Spire, a crackling voice came through their comms. "Unidentified ship, this is the Spire control. State your business or be prepared for boarding." Vokar took a deep breath and responded. "This is the Explorer. We're here to meet Jaren of the Syndicate. He's expecting us." There was a pause, then a different voice, this one colder and more calculating. "Proceed to Docking Bay 9. Any funny business, and we'll scrap your ship for parts." The tension in the cockpit was palpable as Vokar guided the ship into the docking bay. The station loomed over them like a rusting, hollow beast. As they touched down, the docking clamps hissed into place, locking them in. Dralnor stood, checking his sidearm. "Let's not take any chances. Everyone arm up." Vokar, Kira, and Lynn followed suit, while Rallo stayed behind to monitor the ship. "I'll keep comms open," Rallo said, his voice tight with concern. "If anything goes south, I'll prep for an emergency takeoff." Dralnor nodded. "Stay sharp." The airlock opened with a mechanical groan, and the crew stepped out onto the grimy, dimly lit docking platform. The air smelled of rust, oil, and desperation. Armed thugs patrolled the area, eyeing them with suspicion, This was a place where trust was a commodity, and everyone was out for themselves. Jaren, a tall, wiry man with sharp features and a perpetual sneer, waited for them at the entrance to the station. He was flanked by two heavily armed bodyguards, their faces obscured by dark helmets. "Dralnor," Jaren said, his voice oily. "I heard you were coming. I hope you brought something worth my time." Dralnor didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We have information about an ancient threat, something called the Void. It's coming, and if we don't act now, the entire galaxy is in danger." Jaren raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Void? Never heard of it. Sounds like a ghost story to me." "It's no ghost story," Vokar cut in, his voice hard. "We saw it with our own eyes. It's real, and it's powerful enough to wipe out entire civilizations, including yours." Jaren crossed his arms, considering them carefully. "You're telling me you found something more dangerous than the Council, more dangerous than the Consortium, and you came here to warn us? Out of the goodness of your hearts?" Dralnor bit back his frustration. He knew Jaren wouldn't be easy to convince. "We're not asking you to do us any favors. We're offering you a chance to protect your operations. The Void is coming, and once it spreads, no one will be safe, not even the Syndicate." Jaren smirked. "And how do I know you're not just spinning a tale? What's in it for me if I believe you?" Dralnor took a step forward, locking eyes with Jaren. "Survival. We can show you what we found. Data from an ancient human outpost. Proof that the Void has already awakened. If you don't act, your syndicate will be the first to fall when it reaches this part of the galaxy." The mention of humanity caught Jaren's attention. The legend of the humans had been whispered through the criminal underworld for centuries, stories of their unimaginable power and their sudden disappearance. "Humans, you say? Now that's interesting, but you still haven't convinced me." Kira stepped forward, pulling out a data module. "This is what we recovered from the outpost. It shows the Void consuming stars, entire systems falling into darkness. You can see for yourself." Jaren eyed the module warily, then motioned to one of his guards, who took it and plugged it into a portable console. The data flickered to life, showing the swirling darkness of the Void, tendrils of energy consuming everything in its path. Jaren's expression hardened as he watched the display, his smirk fading. "This is real," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Dralnor seized the moment. "We don't have much time. The Void is spreading. You have the resources to spread the warning quickly. If we don't act, everything you've built will be gone." Jaren was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded. "All right. I'll send word to my contacts, but understand this. If you're wrong, if this is some kind of trick, I'll make sure your lives are worth less than the scrap metal of your ship." Dralnor nodded grimly. "We understand. But trust me, we wish we were wrong." Jaren turned to leave, his guards following him. "You'll get your warning, but after that, you're on your own. If this Void is as bad as you say, the Syndicate doesn't make friends. We make deals." As Jaren disappeared into the shadows of the station, the crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had planted the first seed, but the galaxy was vast, and the warning would take time to spread. Time they might not have. Vokar broke the silence. "We need to move quickly. The Void won't wait for the Syndicate to act. We still have to figure out where the humans went, and whether they can help us." Dralnor nodded, his mind racing. They had made it through one challenge, but the real fight was still ahead. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but it was standing on the edge of oblivion, and the crew of the Explorer was the only thing standing in its way. The silence aboard the Explorer was tense as the crew left the spire behind. The Syndicate had agreed to spread the warning about the Void, but Dralnor knew that was only part of the battle. The Syndicate's motives were self-serving, and while they might help stir the galaxy into action, it wouldn't be enough. There was still the looming question of the humans, the only race that had faced the Void and lived to tell the tale. But how could they find them? Kira was the first to break the uneasy quiet as the ship coasted through space, far from the chaos of the Metris cluster. "The human map," she said, her voice steady but thoughtful. "We've been looking at it as just a relic, but what if it's something more? What if it's not just a record of their empire, but a guide?" Dralnor turned toward her, his curiosity piqued. You think the map shows more than just their old territories? Kira nodded, pulling up the holographic projection of the ancient map they had recovered from the human outpost. I've been analyzing the data since we found it. These markings, she zoomed in on several glyphs scattered across the map, aren't just star systems. They're points of reference, routes. It's almost like a pathway, but encoded. Lynn, who had been listening intently, moved closer to the hologram. A pathway to what? That's what I've been trying to figure out, Kira said, tapping a few keys on her console. The map shifted, showing a faint pattern linking the points. If I'm right, this could be a star route, or even a series of ancient jump gates long deactivated. The humans may have used them to escape the void. Dralnor's eyes narrowed as he studied the hologram. A hidden network of jump gates? Could the humans have left behind a trail to follow? It's possible, Kira replied. If they did, they might have gone to a part of the galaxy far beyond the reach of the known factions. Somewhere so remote, even the Galactic Council doesn't know about it. Vokar leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. That's a lot of ifs. We could be chasing a ghost trail. Dralnor glanced at him. Maybe, but it's the only lead we have. If the humans really did escape, they might have left behind clues we can follow. If we can find where they went, we might find the answers we need to stop the void. Lynn began analyzing the data more closely. If this is a trail, it's ancient. These routes have probably decayed over millennia. Navigating them could be risky, especially if they pass through uncharted or dangerous space. We don't have a choice, Dralnor said, his voice firm. We can't rely on the Syndicate alone. If the humans have the key to stopping the void, we need to find them. Kira's fingers flew over her console, adjusting the map's settings. The first marked point is in a sector deep in unclaimed space. It's on the edge of what the Council calls the Fringe, a place where most ships don't venture due to the high risk of spatial anomalies and pirate activity. Vokar smirked. Sounds like the perfect place for ancient secrets and trouble. Dralnor's decision was already made. Kira, set a course. We're following the map. As the explorer entered hyperspace, the crew braced for the journey ahead. The Fringe was a dangerous region, full of mysteries and hazards that even seasoned explorers like them feared. But the map was their only hope. If it led them to the humans, it could save the galaxy. If it didn't, they would be flying deeper into the unknown with no way back. The hum of the ship's engines echoed in Dralnor's ears as he sat alone in the cockpit, gazing out at the streaks of stars racing past. The weight of their mission was crushing. They were chasing legends and myths, all while the void crept closer. For all he knew, the void could already be devouring systems nearby, invisible to the rest of the galaxy. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Kira's voice broke through the silence. Dralnor, you need to see this. He rushed to the control room where Kira had pulled up a new reading on the map. We're approaching the first waypoint, she said, pointing to a faint blip on the edge of the Fringe. But there's something strange. Lynn squinted at the screen. That's a signal? Kira nodded. It's weak, but there's definitely a signal coming from this location. It's old, extremely old, but it's still active. Dralnor's heart skipped a beat. Could it be a human beacon? A warning system, maybe? It's possible, Kira said, her brow furrowed in concentration. We won't know until we get closer, but this could be a clue to where they went or why they left. The ship exited hyperspace, the stars snapping back into place as they approached a barren, desolate system. A dying red star cast a weak glow over the skeletal remains of planets and asteroids, most of them scarred by ancient impacts or disintegrated by the unstable gravity of the star. In the distance, barely visible, was a small, derelict station, where the signal was coming from. There, Lynn said, her voice low. That's where the signal originates. Vokar stared at the station, his expression grim. I don't like this. That place looks like it's been dead for centuries. Why is the signal still running? Dralnor's mind raced. This could be their first real clue to finding the humans, or it could be a trap. We need to investigate. Kira, get us closer, but be ready to pull out if anything seems off. As they approached the station, Dralnor felt the gravity of their mission settle over him again. They were about to walk into the remnants of an ancient civilization, the very civilization that had fled from the void. Whatever they found here could change everything. Or it could confirm their worst fears, that the humans were gone, leaving behind only their ruins. But as the ship drew closer to the station, a new thought gnawed at Dralnor. If the humans had truly fled from the void, why had they left this beacon behind? What had they been trying to warn the galaxy about? The answers lay just ahead, waiting in the cold, empty shell of the past. As the explorer drew closer to the derelict station, the crew couldn't shake the eerie sensation that they were stepping into a graveyard. The station orbited a dead world, its surface cracked and blackened, its atmosphere long stripped away by the dying star's radiation. Dralnor watched the approaching structure from the cockpit, his stomach tightening with every passing second. Kira's voice broke the silence. "We're picking up more data now. The signal is coming from the station's core, but I'm also detecting residual energy signatures. Ancient technology, still partially active." "Could it be human?" Dralnor asked, trying to contain his anticipation. Kira hesitated before answering. "It matches some of the artifacts we found in the outpost. Whatever this place was, it's definitely connected to the humans." Vokar, standing near the viewport, crossed his arms. "We should be on high alert. This place may be deserted, but I don't like the idea of walking into an ancient ruin without knowing what might be left behind." Lin, always cautious, nodded in agreement. "If there's any chance the void found this place, we need to be prepared. It's possible the station was abandoned for a reason. They were closer than ever to uncovering the truth about the humans, and if there were any clues left behind here, they couldn't afford to ignore them. We'll split into 2 teams. Kira and I will head to the station's core to locate the source of the signal. Vokar, Lin, you stay behind on the ship and monitor for any anomalies. If anything goes wrong, you're our lifeline." Vokar didn't argue. "Be careful in there. I've seen too many ruins like this turn into death traps." Kira gathered her equipment, her face set in determination. "We'll stay in contact. This place may be old, but I think there's still a lot it has to tell us." The airlock hissed open as Dralnor and Kira donned their helmets and stepped into the cold vacuum of space. The station loomed above them, its metallic frame pitted and corroded, its surface cracked from centuries of exposure. They used thrusters to navigate toward the docking hatch, which creaked ominously as they approached. With a few precise movements, Kira hacked into the station's ancient systems, overriding the long-dormant security protocols. The hatch opened with a low groan, revealing a dark, abandoned corridor beyond. The walls were lined with faded markings, symbols that were unmistakably human. Dralnor's heart pounded in his chest as they floated inside. "It's real," he murmured. "They were really here." Kira nodded, her eyes wide as she scanned the area with her portable sensors. "And there's still power, barely, but enough to keep some systems running." As they moved deeper into the station, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. The hallways were cluttered with debris, broken consoles, and shattered panels. Faint lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Every step felt like they were intruding on a place frozen in time. Suddenly, Kira's device beeped, drawing their attention. "We're getting closer," she said, her voice hushed. "The signal is coming from just ahead." They entered a large central chamber, where a massive, cylindrical machine stood at the heart of the station. Its surface was covered in glowing glyphs, pulsating with a faint light. It was clearly the source of the signal. A shiver ran down Dralnor's spine as he realized the machine was still functioning, even after all these centuries. Kira moved to the control panel, her hands trembling slightly as she activated the interface. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the heart of the station." As the ancient console flickered to life, streams of data began to appear on the screen. At first, the information was indecipherable, but then the glyphs shifted, translating into the galactic standard language. Dralnor's breath caught as he read the message. "Warning, the void is awakening. All remaining outposts must initiate evacuation." Kira's eyes widened. They knew. The humans knew the void was coming for them. Dralnor scanned the rest of the data, his mind racing. The message had been sent out just before the station was abandoned, a final warning to any human survivors still scattered across the galaxy. But there was more. Coordinates hidden within the data pointing to another location far beyond this system. "This isn't the end," Dralnor said, his voice thick with awe. "The humans didn't just run, they had a plan. These coordinates, they could lead to their final refuge." Kira frowned as she studied the data. But why leave this beacon active? Why not destroy it when they fled? Dralnor's eyes darkened as a chilling thought crossed his mind. Maybe they wanted someone to find it, someone who could follow their trail. Kira stiffened. "You think they wanted someone to fight the void in their place?" "I don't know," Dralnor admitted, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "But these coordinates, we have to follow them. If the humans went there, they might have left behind something we can use, something that could turn the tide against the void." Suddenly, the station shuddered, the walls vibrating violently. Dralnor and Kira exchanged alarmed glances as the lights flickered and dimmed. "Vokar, Lin, what's happening?" Dralnor barked into his comm. Vokar's voice crackled through the comms, strained and tense. "We're detecting massive energy surges from the station. Something's activating, and it's not friendly." Kira's hands flew over the controls, trying to shut down the system, but it was too late. A deep, ominous hum filled the chamber, and the glyphs on the machine began to glow brighter, casting the room in an eerie light. "We have to get out of here," Dralnor shouted, grabbing Kira's arm. They sprinted back down the corridor, their hearts pounding in sync with the rising hum of the station. As they reached the docking hatch, Dralnor saw it. The station's core was powering up, preparing to release a burst of energy. Whatever the humans had left behind, it wasn't meant for them to activate. They launched themselves into the airlock, barely sealing it behind them, before the station's core erupted in a burst of light and sound. The Explorer shook violently as the energy wave washed over it, but Ralos had already prepared for a hasty retreat, firing up the engines just in time. As the ship pulled away from the station, Dralnor and Kira collapsed into their seats, breathing heavily. The station was now a glowing wreck, its last remnants of life expended in that final surge. But they had what they came for, the coordinates, and with them, a glimmer of hope. Dralnor looked at the screen, displaying the newly acquired data. "The humans left us a trail, and now we know where it leads." Kira nodded, still catching her breath. "But what will we find at the end of it?" Dralnor didn't have an answer. But whatever lay at the end of the trail, it would determine the fate of the entire galaxy. The journey to the coordinates left by the humans was long and perilous. The Explorer sailed through regions of space that had no official records, no charts, and no signs of life, just the endless expanse of stars and the occasional desolate system. Dralnor stood at the helm, staring out at the blackness beyond the viewport. The crew was silent, their minds heavy with the weight of what they were about to face. Kira had spent the last few days analyzing the data from the derelict station. "These coordinates lead to a region no one has ever explored," she said, her voice carrying an edge of excitement and fear. "I've cross-referenced every known chart from the Galactic Council, the Syndicate, and even the fringe colonies. There's nothing. It's like this place was purposely hidden." Lin, ever the skeptic, sat cross-legged at her station. "Or maybe it's a graveyard," she said darkly, "a place so dangerous that no one ever made it back to report." Vokar leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, an uncharacteristic seriousness on his face. "We've dealt with pirates, anomalies, and hostile factions, but something about this feels different, like we're walking into something that's far bigger than we can comprehend." Dralnor nodded slowly. "It's possible the humans wanted it to stay hidden, but we're out of options. If we don't find something here, the void will continue to spread, and there won't be a galaxy left to save." The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and a shudder ran through the hull. The crew gathered around the viewport, staring in awe at the sight before them. The coordinates led to the outer rim of a massive, swirling nebula, thick with glowing clouds of gas, crackling with energy. It was beautiful, yet menacing, a natural barrier that seemed to protect whatever lay beyond. Kira tapped her console, reading the sensor data. The nebula is emitting high levels of electromagnetic radiation. It's playing havoc with our systems, but there's definitely something on the other side. Drelnor squinted at the dense clouds. We can't fly through that unshielded. It'll tear the ship apart. Lynn, always thinking ahead, suggested an alternative. What if we use the shuttle? It's smaller and more maneuverable. We could fly in, map out the path, and then bring the explorer through. Vokar nodded. Risky, but doable. If something goes wrong, we'll have a better chance of pulling out in the shuttle. Drelnor considered it for a moment. The nebula was their only obstacle to reaching the humans' last refuge, or whatever remained of it. All right, he said, turning to Kira. You and I will take the shuttle. Lynn and Vokar, stay on the Explorer and keep us updated on any anomalies. Within the hour, the shuttle was prepped and launched. The small vessel felt minuscule compared to the vast nebula ahead, its swirling clouds looming like a cosmic storm. Drelnor and Kira strapped in as they pierced the outer layer, the shuttle rocking from the turbulence. The controls flickered as the electromagnetic radiation interfered with their systems, but Kira quickly recalibrated. We're getting through, she said, her voice strained with focus. But the readings are off the charts. It's like the nebula is alive, constantly shifting. Drelnor stared out at the undulating clouds. Keep us steady, we're almost through. As they neared the core of the nebula, the turbulence eased, and the clouds began to thin. What emerged on the other side took their breath away. Beyond the nebula lay a massive structure, an ancient station, far larger than the one they had encountered earlier. It orbited a small, dim star, casting long shadows across the station's surface. The architecture was unmistakably human, yet far more advanced than anything Drelnor had seen. Kira's voice broke the stunned silence. It's huge. This must have been their final stronghold. Drelnor's pulse quickened. And it's still intact. He quickly checked the sensors. No signs of life. But there's power. Minimal, but it's there. The shuttle coasted toward the station's docking bay, where the doors creaked open as if they had been waiting for them. Drelnor and Kira exchanged uneasy glances. It was as if the station had been expecting them. They landed the shuttle inside, the metallic clang echoing through the empty docking bay. The station's atmosphere was breathable, though stale and cold, with the faint hum of ancient machinery still operating somewhere deep within its structure. As they exited the shuttle, their footsteps echoed in the cavernous bay. This place feels like it's been abandoned for centuries, Kira said, her eyes scanning the towering walls. But the power, it's almost like something's keeping it in stasis. Drelnor nodded. We need to find the core. That's where we'll get answers. They moved deeper into the station, passing through empty halls and chambers that once must have bustled with life. Everywhere they looked, they saw the remnants of human technology, advanced consoles, data terminals, even stasis pods, though most were empty and inactive. Kira's handheld device beeped as they reached a central chamber. The core's just ahead, she said. This is it. The door slid open with a low hiss, revealing a massive control room. At the center was a glowing sphere of light, pulsating slowly as if alive. Data streams floated around it, and the walls were covered in intricate glyphs, the same symbols they had seen in the other human outposts. Drelnor approached cautiously, his heart pounding. This is the heart of their technology, he whispered, their last hope against the void. Kira moved to a nearby console, her hands shaking slightly as she activated it. Data filled the screen, logs, messages, and directives from the humans who had once lived here. One message stood out, written in the familiar glyphs. The void is beyond our ability to destroy. We flee, not out of cowardice, but to preserve what we can. To whoever finds this, know that you stand on the edge of the abyss. Drelnor's breath caught. They couldn't stop it. Kira's eyes widened as she continued reading. But they found something. A weapon, a technology that could slow the void, maybe even contain it. They called it the key. Drelnor's heart raced. Where is it? Did they leave it here? Kira's face paled as she read the final lines of the message. No, they took it with them beyond the stars. But they left behind a piece of it, something that can lead us to the key's final resting place. Dralnor stared at the glowing sphere. Then this is just the beginning. They had found the trail to the key, but the path ahead was fraught with even greater dangers. The void was coming, and only the key could stop it. The future of the galaxy now rested on their shoulders. The atmosphere on the Explorer was thick with tension as Dralnor and Kira returned from the ancient human station. The crew gathered in the ship's central hub, their faces lit by the soft glow of the data they had recovered. Kira stood at the terminal, fingers flying across the keys as she decrypted the final messages left behind by the humans. "It's real," Kira said, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "The key exists. The humans developed it as their last line of defense against the void. But it was too late for them. They fled, hoping someone would find it and finish what they started." Dralnor stepped forward, his mind racing. "Did they leave any more clues? Something to tell us where to find it?" Kira nodded. "They fragmented the key, leaving only this shard behind. But the coordinates embedded in this shard point to a location beyond our galaxy. It's farther than any known civilization has traveled." Lynn, sitting quietly at the edge of the room, leaned forward. "If the key was that important, why didn't they leave it here? Why take it to the ends of the universe?" Vokar, ever the pragmatist, crossed his arms. "They probably feared the void would reach them here. Taking the key away might have been their only chance to keep it from falling into the wrong hands." Kira's fingers continued tapping the console as she pulled up a star map, tracing a faint line across the galactic expanse. "The coordinates lead to a sector we've never seen before. It's on the other side of the great expanse, uncharted territory." Dralnor studied the map. The great expanse was a dangerous, largely unknown region of space, rumored to be filled with anomalies and dead zones. No one had ever returned from an expedition there, but if the key was truly there, they had no choice. "We have to go," Dralnor said, his voice steady. "If this key can stop the void, it's the only hope we have." Vokar frowned. "And what if it's a trap? The void could be leading us into its grasp." Kira shook her head. "The humans left this message with a clear intention. They didn't want the void to find the key. They wanted someone to find it before the void did. It's our only shot." Lynn, usually the most cautious among them, surprised everyone by speaking up. "We've come this far, and we've seen things most people wouldn't believe. If we don't at least try, we're condemning the galaxy to certain death." The decision was unanimous. The crew set course for the great expanse, knowing they were venturing into the unknown. As the Explorer accelerated into hyperspace, the ship hummed with a quiet resolve. They were racing against time, and against an enemy they still didn't fully understand. Days passed as the ship hurtled toward the edge of known space. The crew prepared in silence, checking systems, maintaining weapons, and reviewing the human data again and again. The weight of their mission hung over them, a constant reminder of what was at stake. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace, the ship shuddered violently. The crew was greeted by a sight they hadn't anticipated. A colossal energy field stretched across space, swirling with violent currents of light and shadow. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before, a barrier between them and the final coordinates. Kira scanned the field. "It's some kind of anomaly, but there's something else, something deeper. This is where the key was taken." Dralnor squinted at the undulating energy. "Can we pass through it?" Kira hesitated. "The readings are unstable. We could try, but there's a high risk we might not make it." "We don't have time for risks," Vokar growled. "If we stay here too long, the void will catch up with us." Dralnor weighed their options. The void was spreading faster with each passing day, consuming entire star systems. They were running out of time. He turned to Kira. "We have to go through. It's our only chance." Kira nodded, her hands steadying over the controls. She calibrated the ship's shields, compensating for the chaotic energy swirling around them. With a deep breath, she engaged the engines, and the Explorer surged forward, plunging into the anomaly. The ship was tossed violently from side to side as the energy field resisted their entry. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the hull creaked under the pressure. Dralnor gripped the console, his knuckles white, as the ship groaned and trembled. But they pushed through, emerging on the other side into a calm, dark void. Before them was an ancient structure, larger than the station they had just left behind. It floated in the silence of space, its surface glowing faintly with a golden hue. At its center was a massive sphere, pulsating gently like a beating heart. Kira's voice was barely above a whisper. "This is it. The key." The crew was silent as they docked with the structure. There was no resistance, no defense systems, just an overwhelming sense of finality. They disembarked and entered the heart of the structure, where the key awaited them. The room was bathed in golden light, and at the center of it all was the key, a massive, crystalline object suspended in the air, humming with an otherworldly energy. Its presence was almost overwhelming, filling the air with a heavy electric charge. Dralnor approached cautiously. "This is the weapon. This is what the humans built to stop the void." Kira studied the key, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's more than just a weapon. It's a source of power. The humans couldn't defeat the void, but they created something that could contain it." Vokar stepped forward, his voice low. "And now it's up to us." As they activated the key, the structure around them began to glow brighter, filling the void with light. A pulse of energy shot out, rippling across the stars. The key was awakening, its purpose reignited after centuries of dormancy. Dralnor felt the weight of their journey lift, replaced by a new sense of hope. They had found the key. They had found humanity's last gift to the galaxy, and now they would use it to stand against the void. But as the key activated, a distant rumble echoed through space. The void was coming, faster than they had anticipated. The final battle was upon them, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Dralnor turned to his crew, his eyes filled with determination. "This is our fight now. We finish what the humans started." With the key in their hands, they prepared for the final confrontation with the void, knowing that whatever happened next would decide the fate of the universe. The hum of the key reverberated through the station, filling the crew of the Explorer with equal parts awe and dread. The crystalline artifact's energy cascaded outward, a visible ripple cutting through the black void of space. Yet the glow was unsteady, as though struggling against an unseen force. Dralnor clenched his fists, standing beside Kira at the console. "It's doing something," Kira muttered, her voice strained. "But it's incomplete. The void is pushing against the field. It's not strong enough." Dralnor's stomach tightened. "What are we missing?" Kira frantically scrolled through lines of ancient human code displayed on the console. The humans left instructions, but they fragmented them. "There's a sequence needed to stabilize the key, a sequence we haven't fully decrypted." Before Dralnor could respond, Lynn's voice crackled over the comms. "Dralnor, we've got a problem. Sensors are picking up the void's entities entering the anomaly. It's coming for the station." The blood drained from Dralnor's face. Void entities were the nightmare form of the consuming force, a terrifying blend of shadow and raw destruction. He turned to Vokar, whose expression was grim. "How much time do we have?" Dralnor asked. "Not enough," Lynn replied. "They'll breach the perimeter within minutes." Dralnor's gaze swept the crew. "Then we fight. We hold them back as long as we can." Kira hesitated, torn between the console and the looming threat. "I need time to finish decoding the sequence. If we don't stabilize the key, it won't matter how many void offspring we kill. They'll just keep coming." "Then you get us that sequence," Dralnor said firmly. "Vokar and I will handle the rest." The station shuddered under another tremor, the vibrations rattling through their boots. The key pulsed weakly, struggling to resist the encroaching void. Dralnor and Vokar rushed to the outer chamber where the first signs of the void breach appeared, a gash of inky black tearing through reality itself. Its creatures came through, grotesque and otherworldly. They weren't bound by the laws of physicality, their forms shifting and flickering in impossible ways. Dralnor raised his plasma rifle, steadying his aim as the first entity lunged forward. His shot connected, and the creature exploded into shards of darkness before reforming moments later. "These things don't stay down," Vokar growled, firing off his own round. His weapon glowed white-hot, the discharge blasting another void creature apart, though it too began to reform. "They're feeding off the key's instability," Dralnor said grimly, recalibrating his rifle. "We need to buy Kira more time." In the command chamber, Kira's fingers flew across the console, the ancient human schematics unfolding like a maddening puzzle. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she muttered calculations under her breath. Each fragment of the missing sequence she unlocked brought her closer to the solution. But it was a race against time. Lynn's voice came through again, sharp with urgency. The anomaly's destabilizing. Whatever the key is doing, it's drawing void energy toward us like a magnet. Kira bit her lip. The key is reacting to the void. It's trying to generate a containment field, but without the sequence, it can't focus the energy. I just need a little longer. Outside, the battle intensified. More void beings poured through the breach, their screeches an eerie sound that reverberated through the station's metal walls. Dralnor and Vokar fought side by side, the plasma rounds from their weapons cutting through the encroaching darkness. Yet for every creature they destroyed, more emerged, their movements erratic and terrifying. "Dralnor!" Vokar shouted, dodging a tendril of shadow that lashed out at him. "I don't think we can hold them much longer." Dralnor gritted his teeth. "We don't have a choice." A sudden tremor shook the station, nearly knocking both men off their feet. Back in the command chamber, Kira gasped as the console lit up with a burst of symbols. The final fragment of the sequence had been decrypted. "I've got it," Kira yelled over the comms. "But there's a catch. The sequence requires a direct power source to stabilize the key. The station's reserves won't cut it. We'll need the Explorer to feed its reactor into the system." Lynn's voice came through immediately. "Are you insane? If I reroute the reactor to the station, I'll lose control of the ship. And there's no guarantee it'll even work." "It's the only way," Kira shot back. "Without the reactor, the key won't activate, and the void will destroy us all." Another screech echoed down the corridors as the void entities pushed further into the station. Dralnor and Vokar retreated toward the command chamber, firing relentlessly as the creatures closed in. "Do it, Lynn," Dralnor shouted into his comms. "We'll figure out the rest later. Just give us the power." A pause. Then Lynn's voice came through, resigned but firm. "Rerouting now. You'd better know what you're doing." Back in the command chamber, Kira braced herself as a surge of energy coursed through the console. The key glowed brighter, its pulses now steadier and more focused. The station shook violently as the energy levels spiked, the crystalline structure humming with raw power. "It's working," Kira said, relief flooding her voice. "But the key's containment field will take time to stabilize. We need to hold out a little longer." Outside, Dralnor and Vokar stood at the threshold of the command chamber, the void creatures swarming closer. The station's defenses flickered, struggling to hold back the encroaching darkness. Dralnor fired a shot, then turned to Vokar. "This is it," he said. "We hold the line no matter what." Vokar grinned, his weapon at the ready. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the two prepared for the final stand, the key emitted a burst of light, a precursor to the containment field it was building. The crew had come too far to fail now. The void was relentless, but so were they. The battle was far from over, but in that moment they stood united, fighting for a galaxy that might never know their sacrifice. The station trembled as the first void entities breached its interior, their forms seeping through the fractures in space like black ink spreading in water. The creatures defied logic, their jagged shapes constantly shifting, as though reality itself struggled to contain their existence. They moved with eerie fluidity, their edges flickering with faint, ghostly light. Dralnor and Vokar stood at the forefront of the corridor, leading to the command chamber, weapons ready. The flickering emergency lights above cast shadows that danced alongside the encroaching darkness. Dralnor fired the first shot, the plasma bolt streaking toward the closest entity. It struck true, the creature's form splintering into shards of void-like matter. But even as it dissipated, its fragments swirled and coalesced, reforming into something even more grotesque. "They're reforming faster now," Vokar growled, unloading his rifle at the advancing horde. "This isn't just a fight, it's a damn endurance test." Dralnor reloaded his rifle, his jaw tight. "Then we don't let up. Kira needs time. We give it to her." In the command chamber, Kira's fingers raced across the console as the key's energy levels fluctuated. The glowing artifact pulsed like a heartbeat, fighting against the chaotic forces surrounding it. Kira could feel the strain in the air, the key struggling to contain the void's relentless advance. "I've stabilized part of the sequence," she muttered, her voice trembling as she worked. "But the field isn't strong enough yet. The void's interference is overwhelming the key." Lynn's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm feeding as much power as I can from the Explorer, but the ship's reactor is redlining. If you don't finish this soon, we'll lose the ship, and you with it." "I know," Kira snapped, panic edging into her tone. "I'm pushing as fast as I can." Another tremor rocked the station, and a panel behind Kira burst into flames, sparks showering the room. She didn't flinch, her focus locked on the console. The schematics displayed on the screen revealed the intricate network of the key's energy pathways, each line representing a critical link in the containment field. One error could spell disaster. In the corridor, Vokar switched to his plasma blade, its searing light slicing through a void creature that had lunged too close. The blade hummed as it cut, leaving behind trails of burning energy that momentarily disrupted the creature's form. "These things just keep coming," Vokar shouted over the din, his voice strained but defiant. "We can't hold them forever." Dralner fired another shot, his breathing heavy. "We don't have to hold forever, just long enough." The void entities seemed to sense the urgency, their movements growing more erratic and aggressive. One creature lunged at Dralner, its elongated limbs whipping through the air. He ducked and countered with a precise shot to its core, but even as it disintegrated, another took its place. "We're being overrun," Vokar called out, sweat dripping down his face. "Kira, how much longer?" Kira's voice came through the comms, strained but determined. "I'm nearly there. The key is stabilizing, but I need a final input to lock the sequence. Just hold on." Another wave of void creatures surged forward, their forms rippling like living shadows. Dralnor and Vokar fought with everything they had, their movements synchronized from years of combat experience. But the relentless assault was taking its toll. Dralnor's arms ached from the repeated recoil of his rifle, and Vokar's plasma blade flickered as its energy reserves dwindled. In the command chamber, Kira's screen lit up with a burst of symbols. The key's energy levels spiked, and the crystalline artifact glowed brighter than ever. Kira's heart leapt. "I've got it. The containment field is almost ready, but it's going to need a massive final surge of power to activate." Lynn's voice was sharp. "Define massive." Kira hesitated. "More than the reactor can handle. If we push it too hard, it could overload and take the station with it." "Wonderful," Lynn replied dryly. "But it's not like we have much of a choice, do we?" Dralnor's voice cut in over the comms. "Do it. Overload the reactor if you have to. We'll hold as long as we can." "Dralnor," Lynn began, but he interrupted her. "Just do it," he barked, firing another round into a void creature that was inches away from breaking through their line. Lynn sighed. "Fine, but you owe me more than one drink if we survive this." As Lynn began the power transfer, the station groaned under the strain. The key's glow intensified, its pulses becoming steadier and more forceful. Kira monitored the energy flow, her hands flying across the console as she directed the surge into the key's core. Outside the command chamber, the void creatures began to falter, their forms flickering as the key's energy pushed back against their presence. Dralnor and Vokar seized the opportunity, driving the creatures away from the entrance with renewed ferocity. "It's working," Vokar shouted, his plasma blade cutting through another entity. "They're weakening." But the victory was short-lived. A massive void creature emerged from the breach, its form towering over the others. It moved with deliberate, terrifying purpose, its presence sending a chill through the air. Dralnor's grip tightened on his rifle. "Kira, whatever you're doing, finish it now." Kira glanced at the countdown on her screen. "Almost there. Just a few more seconds." The massive void creature roared, its voice a guttural echo that seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. It charged toward the command chamber, its movements unstoppable. Dralnor stepped forward, his rifle aimed squarely at the creature's center. "Vokar, with me. We end this now." As the two prepared to face the monstrous foe, the key emitted a sudden, blinding pulse of energy. Kira's voice rang out over the comms. "The containment field is activating. Hold on." The chamber filled with light as the key unleashed its power, its energy surging outward in a desperate bid to repel the void. Dralnor and Vokar braced themselves, knowing the battle was far from over. But in that moment, they stood firm, fighting for the hope that their sacrifice would mean something. The wave of energy emanating from the key rippled outward, slamming into the void creatures with devastating force. For the first time, the entities recoiled, their amorphous shapes contorting in agony as the key's containment field began to take hold. The massive void creature at the forefront hesitated, its towering form flickering as though caught between dimensions. In the corridor outside the command chamber, Dralnor and Vokar exchanged a glance, both men breathing heavily but unwilling to lower their weapons. "Is it over?" Vokar asked, his plasma blade still humming faintly. Dralnor shook his head, his gaze fixed on the writhing monstrosity ahead. "Not yet. They're adapting. They always do." The station shuddered again as the void forces seemed to regroup, their movements becoming more erratic, but no less dangerous. The key pulsed brighter, its energy now a near-blinding beacon. In the command chamber, Kira worked feverishly to stabilize the containment field, her fingers flying across the console as alarms blared around her. "Lynn!" Kira barked over the comms. "I need more power. Now. The field is expanding, but it's not covering the entire breach." Lynn's voice came through, fraught with tension. "I'm giving you everything the reactor's got. If I push it any harder, we're going to blow the Explorer to pieces." "Then we blow it." Dralnor's voice cut through the comm channel, resolute and final. "The ship is secondary. This station and the key are all that matter now." Lynn hesitated for a moment, her silence heavy with the weight of the decision. Finally she replied, her voice cold and determined. "Understood. Redirecting all remaining power to the key." The lights on the station dimmed to near darkness as every ounce of energy was funneled into the crystalline artifact. The key flared, its pulses now rhythmic and stable. Kira's console lit up with confirmation. "The containment field is stabilizing. We're pushing them back." But outside, the void entities weren't retreating without a fight. The massive creature at their helm let out an ear-splitting roar, its form coalescing into something more solid, more defined. Tendrils of shadow lashed out, striking the station's walls and tearing through metal as though it were paper. Dralnor and Vokar stood their ground, firing relentlessly at the beast. Each plasma shot struck true, but the creature seemed almost impervious now, its movements fueled by desperation. It surged forward, barreling down the corridor toward the command chamber. "Kira!" Dralnor shouted over the chaos. "If you've got a miracle in there, now's the time." "I'm working on it," Kira snapped, her voice tight with focus. She input the final sequence, and the key responded with a deafening hum. The containment field expanded rapidly, its glowing energy forming a barrier around the station. The void creatures outside the barrier screamed as they were forced back, their forms disintegrating into wisps of darkness. But the massive creature wasn't so easily deterred. It slammed into the barrier with unimaginable force, the station rocking violently under the impact. Kira staggered, grabbing onto the console for support. "The field is holding, but just barely. That thing is trying to punch through." Vokar turned to Dralnor, his expression grim. "We need to take it out, here and now. If it breaks through, Kira and the key are done for." Dralnor nodded, his jaw set. "Agreed. Let's finish this." The two charged toward the creature, their weapons blazing. Dralnor aimed for its core, his plasma rounds striking the dense mass of energy at its center. Vokar leaped forward with his blade, slashing through the creature's tendrils and severing them one by one. The beast howled in rage, its form flickering as it struggled to maintain cohesion. Inside the command chamber, Kira watched the battle on the monitors, her heart pounding. The containment field was stabilizing, but she knew it wasn't enough. The key needed one final surge of energy to seal the breach entirely, but that surge would come at a cost. "Lynn," she said quietly, her voice shaking, Prepare to detonate the reactor. Lynn's response was immediate. Are you out of your mind? That'll take out the entire station. Kira's hands trembled as she adjusted the controls. The station's already lost if we don't stop this thing. The reactor's energy will amplify the key enough to close the breach permanently. It's our only shot. Lynn hesitated, her voice breaking. Kira, there's no coming back from this. I know, Kira whispered. Just do it. Outside, Dralner and Vokar fought with everything they had, their movements growing slower as exhaustion set in. The creature was weakening, its form destabilizing with each strike, but it was still fighting with relentless fury. Kira, whatever you're doing, do it fast, Dralner shouted, narrowly dodging a swipe from one of the creature's tendrils. Kira's fingers hovered over the console. She took a deep breath, her eyes locked on the key. Goodbye, she whispered, then slammed her hand down on the final command. The station's reactor detonated with a blinding flash, the energy surge directed straight into the key. The artifact absorbed the explosion, its crystalline structure glowing brighter than ever before. The containment field expanded rapidly, engulfing the void creatures and the breach itself. The massive creature let out one final piercing scream before disintegrating into nothingness. The breach sealed with a resounding clap, and the void's presence vanished entirely. In the silence that followed, the station drifted in the void of space, its systems offline. Kira, Dralner, Vokar, and the rest of the crew were gone, heroes whose sacrifice would never be known by the galaxy they had saved. Far away, on the now distant Explorer, Lynn sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the empty expanse of stars where the station had once been. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "They did it." And then, silence. The Explorer drifted silently through the void, its hull battered and its systems barely functional. Lynn sat in the pilot's chair, her hands gripping the controls so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The stars outside felt colder, more distant than ever. The absence of the station, the absence of her crew, was an ache she couldn't shake. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice cracking. "All of them." Behind her, a faint crackle from the comm system interrupted the stillness. Lynn turned sharply, her heart racing. Was it possible? Could anyone have survived? She reached for the console, her fingers trembling, and adjusted the frequency. The signal was weak, distorted, and faintly familiar. "Lynn. Kira." The voice was barely audible but unmistakable. It was Dralner. "Dralner!" Lynn shouted, her voice desperate. "Where are you? What's your status?" The signal flickered, breaking into static. Then, after a few agonizing moments, Dralnor's voice returned, clearer but strained. "We didn't make it, Lynn." "Not really." Lynn froze, her heart sinking. "What do you mean? Are you alive or not?" There was a pause, and then Dralnor's voice softened. "We're here, in a way. The key, its energy didn't just destroy the void. It pulled us in. We're part of it now." Lynn's stomach twisted as the implication sank in. "You're telling me you've become—" "What? Some kind of energy? Ghosts?" "We don't know," Dralner replied, his voice tinged with resignation. "It's like being everywhere and nowhere at once. We can feel the key's presence, its purpose, and we can feel the void. It's still out there, Lynn. It's wounded, but not gone." The revelation hit Lynn like a punch to the gut. "You mean this isn't over? Everything you sacrificed, it wasn't enough?" "It bought time," Dralner said firmly. "Enough time for the galaxy to prepare. But the void, it'll try again. And when it does, the key will need someone to wield it." Lynn sat back in her chair, her mind racing. The key was gone, along with the station and the crew. If it had absorbed their essence, then what exactly was it now? A weapon? A prison? Or something far more dangerous? "I can't do this alone," Lynn said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't fight what's coming, not without you." "You won't be alone," Dralner said. "The key chose you to survive for a reason. We're still connected to it, and through it to you. When the time comes, we'll guide you. Lynn shook her head, frustration bubbling to the surface. I don't even know what that means. Guide me? How? You're not even here. Another voice broke through the static, Vokar's. Pull yourself together, Lynn. You've always been stronger than you think. We're counting on you to finish what we started. Lynn closed her eyes, the weight of their words pressing down on her. She wanted to scream, to cry, to curse the galaxy for its cruelty. But she couldn't. Not now. Not while the voices of her fallen crew urged her forward. The comm went silent again. The faint hum of the explorer's systems, the only sound in the cabin. Lynn stared at the empty console, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had lost everything, her friends, her purpose, her hope. And yet, the key's influence lingered, a faint warmth in the back of her mind. She stood and made her way to the viewport, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere out there, the void was regrouping, waiting for its chance to strike again. And somewhere within her, the echoes of her crew, her family, remained. I'll finish this, she said aloud, her voice steady. I don't know how, but I'll find a way. In the depths of her mind, she felt a flicker of approval, a faint pulse of energy that could only be the key. It wasn't just a weapon or a relic. It was alive, in some way. And it had chosen her. The Explorer's systems flickered as Lynn powered up the engines. The ship groaned in protest, but it obeyed. She set a course for the nearest station, her resolve hardening with every passing second. As the ship accelerated, Lynn felt the faintest whisper of Dralner's voice in her mind. We'll be with you, Lynn. Always. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lynn allowed herself a small, bitter smile. You better be, she muttered, gripping the controls. Because I'm going to need all the help I can get. The Explorer disappeared into the star-speckled void, its lone pilot carrying the weight of the galaxy's future on her shoulders. Behind her, in the distant reaches of space, the remnants of the station and the key glimmered faintly, a reminder of sacrifice and a warning of the darkness yet to come. The Explorer limped into the bustling orbit station of Keltar Nexus, a massive trading hub suspended between two suns. The station's glittering architecture sprawled across space like a web of steel and glass, illuminated by the faint glimmers of passing freighters and patrol ships. Lynn guided her battered vessel toward a docking bay, her hands steady, despite the dull ache of exhaustion seeping into her bones. The docking clamps engaged with a hiss, and Lynn let out a shaky breath. She wasn't sure what she hoped to find here. Supplies, allies, or maybe just a brief reprieve from the crushing silence of the ship. But her resolve was clear. The galaxy had to be warned. The void wasn't finished, and if it came back stronger, they wouldn't survive another encounter. As the hatch opened, Lynn was met with the chaotic hum of the Nexus. Traders barked over comms, and maintenance crews darted between ships, their tools glinting in the artificial light. The air smelled faintly of oil and ozone, a stark contrast to the sterile silence she had grown used to. Lynn stepped onto the platform, her gear slung over her shoulder. Her first stop was the Nexus Council Chamber, a towering spire at the station's core, where representatives of countless species negotiated trade routes and alliances. If anyone could rally the galaxy's forces, it was them. She approached the chamber's entrance, where a pair of hulking guards stood sentinel. Their insectoid features twitched as she approached, their compound eyes reflecting her weary form. "State your business," one of them rasped, its voice a low buzz. "I have urgent information for the Council," Lynn said firmly. "It's about the void." The guards exchanged a glance before one of them gestured for her to follow. "You'll wait until the Council grants an audience," it said, its tone curt. Lynn was led into a massive antechamber, its walls adorned with holographic banners displaying the flags of member worlds. Dozens of diplomats and emissaries milled about, their conversations a cacophony of languages. Lynn felt out of place in her scuffed flight suit, but she squared her shoulders and approached the nearest terminal to submit her request. Hours passed. Lin's patience wore thin as she watched petty disputes and trade negotiations take precedence over the galaxy's survival. Finally, a clerk approached her, his avian features sharp and his robes immaculate. "The council will see you now," he said, his tone clipped. Lin was ushered into the chamber, a vast circular room with representatives seated in raised tiers. Each member was holographically projected, their physical locations scattered across the galaxy. At the center of the room stood a single podium, illuminated by a harsh spotlight. Lin stepped into the light, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on her. "State your name and purpose," boomed the voice of the presiding speaker, a towering reptilian figure whose dark maroon scales gleamed under the light. "Captain Lin Torin of the Explorer," she began. "I've come to warn you about the void. It's not gone, it's regrouping. And if we don't act, it will destroy everything." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some representatives leaning forward in interest while others scoffed. A feline envoy from the Sarac coalition spoke first, her voice dripping with skepticism. "The void was sealed. The station and the key were destroyed. What evidence do you have to the contrary?" Lin clenched her fists, anger simmering beneath her calm facade. "I was there. My crew gave their lives to close the breach, but the void wasn't eradicated. It's weakened, yes, but it's still out there. And it will come back." Another voice cut in, this one from a wiry humanoid with translucent skin. "If this is true, why bring this to us? Why not alert your Terran alliance? Surely humans would handle their own mess." Lin's jaw tightened. "Because humanity is scattered, and the alliance is fractured. We've been reduced to whispers and myths. I'm here because this isn't just humanity's fight, it's everyone's." The chamber erupted into debate, voices overlapping as representatives argued over the credibility of Lin's claims and the feasibility of taking action. Lin stood silently, her frustration mounting. She had expected resistance, but not this level of apathy. Finally, the presiding speaker raised a clawed hand, silencing the room. "Captain Torin, your claim is extraordinary, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Do you have any proof of the void's continued existence?" Lin hesitated, her mind racing. The key's energy lingered faintly within her, a connection she could feel but not explain. But how could she prove it to them? "I don't have physical evidence," she admitted, her voice steady. "But I have my word and the scars to prove it. If you ignore this threat, it won't matter whether you believed me or not, because there won't be anyone left to argue." The room fell into uneasy silence. Finally, a hulking figure from the Vorsath Dominion spoke, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "If there is even a chance she's telling the truth, we cannot ignore it. The void nearly destroyed us once. Can we afford to take that risk again?" Others voiced reluctant agreement, but the feline envoy scoffed. "You propose to mobilize the galaxy's resources based on fear and hearsay? This reeks of Terran desperation." Lin stepped forward, her voice rising above the murmurs. "Call it desperation if you want, but when the void comes for your worlds, you'll wish you had acted." The presiding speaker leaned forward, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "Captain Torin, we will deliberate on your claims. Until then, you are dismissed." Lin left the chamber, her fists clenched in frustration. As she stepped back onto the bustling platform of the Nexus, she felt the faintest pulse of energy within her, a reminder that the key's essence was still with her. She would have to prepare for the worst. If the council wouldn't act, she'd find others who would. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, and Lin wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Lin stared at the holographic map projected from the Explorer's main console, her fingers hovering over the navigation controls. The stars glimmered faintly in the display, each one representing a potential haven or a graveyard. Calic stood behind her, his massive Orthanian frame casting a long shadow over the bridge. "You're sure about this, Torin?" he asked, his voice low and gruff. "The dust market isn't exactly a place for diplomacy." Lin glanced over her shoulder, her eyes dark with exhaustion but filled with resolve. "We don't have a choice, Calic. If the Council won't listen, we need allies who will. And the people in the dust market aren't bound by politics. They survive because they're adaptable. That's what we need now." The ship groaned as it entered the orbit of Nebre 6, where the infamous dust market floated in the planet's upper atmosphere. The station's patchwork construction was a chaotic clash of scavenged starship hulls and industrial scrap, held together by force fields and desperation. It was a place where rules didn't exist, and morality was a currency no one could afford. As the explorer approached one of the docking bays, Lynn could feel the weight of her mission pressing down on her. Her crew was gone, her allies scattered, and her resources dwindling, but she refused to let fear or doubt take hold. If the dust market's denizens could be convinced, she might have a fighting chance. The airlock hissed open, and Lynn stepped onto the station's rusted platform, her boots echoing against the metal. Calic followed, his broad shoulders brushing against the narrow doorway. Around them, the dust market was alive with activity, merchants shouting over one another, mercenaries polishing weapons, and smugglers exchanging contraband in shadowed corners. "Stick close," Calic muttered, his yellow eyes scanning the chaotic crowd. "And don't let anyone see you flinch. They'll smell weakness and eat you alive." Lynn gave a curt nod, her hand resting on the blaster strapped to her hip. She moved through the bustling corridors, her gaze sharp and focused. Every so often, she caught glimpses of wanted posters plastered on the walls, some depicting her face, others bearing the names of infamous criminals who had vanished into the galaxy's underbelly. Their destination was a dimly lit cantina, nestled in the heart of the station, a haven for those who operated outside the law. The air inside was thick with smoke and the scent of spilled alcohol. Lynn approached the bar, ignoring the stares from patrons who recognized her as an outsider. The bartender, a wiry alien with skin tone of polished limerick, raised a segmented brow as Lynn leaned against the counter. "What'll it be?" "I'm looking for Calic's contact," Lynn said, her voice steady. "They said to meet here." The bartender nodded toward a booth in the far corner. Lynn's eyes followed the gesture, landing on a figure cloaked in shadow. She exchanged a glance with Calic before making her way across the room. The figure turned out to be a lanky humanoid, with an ominous look and translucent skin. He introduced himself as Vikan, a broker of secrets and favors. "You're either brave or stupid to come here," Vikan hissed, his voice a soft rasp. "What do you want, human?" Lynn sat across from him, her expression unwavering. "I need people, fighters, engineers, anyone willing to stand against the void." Vikan chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You're not the first to claim you've seen the void. Most of them are dead now, either by its hand or by their own desperation." "I'm not here to argue whether it's real," Lynn said, sliding a small holographic projector across the table. "Watch this." The recording played, showing the final moments of her crew aboard the station where they had sealed the rift. Their bravery, their sacrifices, and the monstrous forms of the void were laid bare in flickering light. Vikan's amused expression faded, replaced by something resembling unease. When the recording ended, he leaned back in their seat, his pale fingers tapping against the table. "You're either a fool or the galaxy's last hope," they muttered. "Either way, I'll make some calls. But don't expect a warm welcome. The people I know don't fight for free." "I'll give them whatever they want," Lynn said firmly. "Just get them here." Vikan tilted his head, studying her. "You don't strike me as someone with much to give." Lynn's lips twitched into a humorless smile. "That's because I'm not. But what I can offer is the chance to live long enough to see another sunrise. That's worth more than any payment." Vikan didn't reply, but he activated his comm unit and began speaking in a language Lynn didn't recognize. As the conversation unfolded, Lynn felt Calic's heavy hand rest on her shoulder. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "No," Lynn admitted, "but it's all we've got." The tension aboard the Explorer was suffocating. Lynn's newly assembled crew, A volatile mix of mercenaries, rogues, and drifters had spent the past several days confined within the ship's cramped quarters, their uneasy alliance strained by clashing personalities and fragile egos. Lynn stood on the bridge, staring out at the swirling black void of hyperspace, trying to push aside the constant hum of arguments that filtered through the comms. Calic entered the bridge, his heavy footfalls echoing in the silence. "They're about to kill each other back there," he grumbled. "You've got two smugglers fighting over cargo space, a mechanic who won't stop drinking, and an assassin who keeps asking why we haven't been paid yet." Lynn sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "We don't have time for this. We're heading to Karvos. If we can recover the weapon prototype there, it might give us a fighting chance." "Karvos?" Calic raised an eyebrow. "You mean the frozen death trap where half the Terran Alliance's scientists went missing during the war?" "That's the one," Lynn replied. "The research facility was developing something to counter void energy. It's a long shot, but we need that tech." Calic crossed his arms, his orange eyes narrowing. "You realize most of the people on this ship didn't sign up to fight void monsters, right? They're here because they think you've got a plan that'll make them rich, or at least keep them alive." Lynn turned to face him, her voice quiet but firm. "If we don't stop the void, there won't be any galaxy left to fight over. They'll understand that soon enough." Before Calic could respond, the ship's alarm blared. Lynn rushed to the console, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We're dropping out of hyperspace," she announced. "Brace yourselves." The Explorer shuddered violently as it re-entered normal space, the swirling colors of hyperspace giving way to the icy blackness of the Karvos system. The planet loomed ahead, its frozen surface glinting faintly in the light of its distant sun. Lynn activated the intercom. "We're approaching Karvos. Everyone to their stations." The crew assembled in the ship's main hold, their expressions ranging from wary to outright hostile. Lynn stood before them, her hands gripping the edges of the central table, where a holographic map of Karvos's surface was displayed. "This is the target," she said, pointing to a blinking marker on the map. "The Terran Alliance's research facility is buried beneath the ice here. It was abandoned after an incident that no one survived to report. We need to get in, recover the prototype, and get out. Fast." A sharp laugh came from the back of the group. "Sounds easy," a reptilian mercenary sneered, his tail twitching. "Except for the part where we all freeze to death or get eaten by whatever killed those scientists." "Then stay on the ship," Lynn shot back. "No one's forcing you to be here." The mercenary growled but didn't reply. Lynn turned her attention back to the map. "The facility's systems are likely offline, so we'll need to bring our own power sources to access anything. Be prepared for extreme cold and possible hostiles. This isn't a scavenging mission. It's survival." The crew muttered amongst themselves, but no one backed out. Lynn could see the doubt in their eyes, but she didn't have time to address it. She needed results, not reassurance. The landing on Karvos was rough. The planet's surface was a frozen wasteland, battered by howling winds and blinding snowstorms. The Explorer touched down near the coordinates of the facility, its engines steaming in the frigid air. Lynn led the group out into the storm, her breath misting as she adjusted her thermal suit. Calic walked beside her, his hulking frame providing some relief from the biting wind. Behind them, the rest of the crew trudged through the snow, their figures barely visible through the swirling white. When they reached the entrance to the facility, Lynn's heart sank. The massive doors were sealed shut, encased in layers of ice. "Looks like no one's been here in decades," Calic muttered. Lynn activated her suit's cutting torch, directing the crew to help clear the ice. It took hours of grueling work, but eventually the doors groaned open, revealing a dark, gaping stairwell that led into the depths of the complex. Inside, the air was still and unnaturally cold. The facility's halls were littered with broken equipment and frozen corpses, their expressions twisted in terror. Lynn tried not to look too closely as she led the group deeper, her flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. "This place is a tomb," one of the smugglers whispered, their voice trembling. "Stay focused," Lynn replied. "We're almost there." They reached the central lab, a massive chamber filled with dormant machinery and shattered glass. In the center of the room stood the prototype, an oblong-shaped device that pulsed faintly with an eerie blue light. Lynn approached it cautiously, her breath fogging the air. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The void disruptor." As she activated the device, a low hum filled the room. The blue light grew brighter, casting flickering shadows across the walls. But then, something shifted in the darkness. Lynn froze as a chilling scream echoed through the facility, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The corpses in the hallways began to stir, their frozen limbs creaking as they rose to their feet. "Void infected!" Calic shouted, drawing his weapon. The crew opened fire, their blasters illuminating the chamber in bursts of red and blue. Lynn grabbed the disruptor, its weight heavier than she expected, and shouted over the chaos. "We have to get out of here!" The battle was brutal. The void-infected were relentless, their twisted forms driven by a mindless hunger. By the time the group reached the surface, they were bloodied and exhausted, their numbers reduced. As the explorer lifted off, Lynn stared down at the icy wasteland below, her hands trembling as she clutched the disruptor. She knew the cost had been high, but the fight was far from over. "The void isn't coming," she said quietly. "It's already here." The explorer hurtled through hyperspace, its hull groaning under the strain of the latest battle. The atmosphere on board was heavy, an unspoken tension gripping the crew. Of the 20 they had started with, only 12 remained, and some of those carried fresh injuries that even the ship's medical bay couldn't fully heal. Lynn sat at the command console, staring at the void disruptor resting on the table in front of her. The device pulsed faintly, an unnatural blue glow emanating from its core. It was supposed to be their hope, the key to fighting back against the creeping darkness. But holding it now, she couldn't help but feel an unsettling sense of dread. "This thing killed everyone who worked on it," Lynn muttered, breaking the silence. Calic, seated across from her, leaned back with a heavy sigh. "Not just them. Half our crew, too." His voice was low, tinged with frustration. "Was it worth it?" Lynn looked up at him, her jaw tightening. "Do you have a better idea, Calic? Because I'm all ears." He didn't reply, and for a moment, the only sound was the hum of the ship's engines. The silence was interrupted by the sharp crackle of the ship's intercom. "Captain," came the voice of Rhea, the ship's engineer, "you'd better get to the engine room. Now." Lynn and Calic exchanged a worried glance before rushing to the engine bay. When they arrived, they found Rhea standing by the reactor, her face pale and her usually steady hands trembling. "What's going on?" Lynn demanded. Rhea pointed to the reactor core, where faint tendrils of black mist curled and writhed. "It's the void," she whispered. "It's inside the ship." A chill ran down Lynn's spine. The void had always been something distant, a monstrous force they could face with weapons and strategy. But now, it was here, infiltrating the explorer itself. "Shut it down," Lynn ordered. "I can't," Rhea said, her voice rising in panic. "If I shut down the reactor, we'll be stranded in hyperspace. We might never get out." Calic stepped forward, his hand resting on his blaster. "Then what's the alternative? Letting this thing eat us from the inside out?" Before Lynn could respond, the lights flickered, and the ship's systems began to malfunction. Panels sparked, and warning alarms blared throughout the corridors. The void's presence was spreading, consuming the ship like a virus. "Seal off the engine room," Lynn said, her mind racing. "Rhea, stay here and keep it contained. Do whatever it takes to keep this ship running." Rhea hesitated, her wide eyes locking with Lynn's. "You're asking me to fight it?" "I'm asking you to buy us time," Lynn said firmly. "We'll figure this out." With a reluctant nod, Rhea turned back to the reactor, her tools clinking as she began working. Lynn and Calic hurried back to the bridge, where the rest of the crew had gathered, their faces filled with fear and confusion. "What the hell is happening?" one of the smugglers demanded. "The void's in the ship," Lynn said bluntly. "It's infecting the systems. We need to find a way to stop it before it takes over completely." The crew erupted into arguments, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of panic. Lynn slammed her fist on the console, silencing them. "Listen to me," she shouted. "We've faced worse than this, and we've survived. We'll survive this too, but only if we work together." Her words seemed to calm them, at least for the moment. She assigned tasks, some to monitor the ship's systems, others to prepare weapons in case the void manifested physically. But deep down, she knew they were running out of time. Several minutes passed, and the situation grew worse. The void's tendrils were now visible throughout the ship, creeping along walls and floors like living shadows. Crew members reported hearing whispers, faint and insidious, echoing in their minds. Calic found Lynn in the armory, loading a plasma rifle. "We can't keep this up," he said, his voice low. "It's taking the ship, Lynn, piece by piece." Lynn didn't look at him. "I know." "Then what's the plan?" She slammed the rifle down on the table and turned to face him, her eyes blazing with frustration. "I don't know, Calic. I don't know how to fight something we can't even see." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Calic placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "We can't save the ship, Lynn, but we can save the crew. We need to abandon ship." Lynn stared at him, her mind racing. The thought of leaving the Explorer, their last sanctuary, was almost unbearable. But he was right. The ship was lost. The crew gathered in the hangar, loading supplies onto the escape shuttles. The void's presence was everywhere now, its black tendrils writhing like hungry snakes. Lynn stood at the edge of the group, watching as her crew prepared to leave. "Are we sure this is going to work?" one of the mercenaries asked, glancing nervously at the shadows creeping along the walls. "It's our only chance," Lynn said. "Get to the shuttles, now." As the crew boarded the shuttles, Lynn stayed behind, her gaze fixed on the void disruptor still sitting on the bridge. She couldn't leave it behind, not when it might be the only thing that could stop the void. "I'll be right behind you," she told Calic as he climbed into the shuttle. He gave her a skeptical look, but didn't argue. "Don't take too long, Lynn." Once the shuttles launched, Lynn sprinted back to the bridge, grabbing the disruptor and slinging it over her shoulder. The tendrils of void energy were thicker now, their movements more aggressive. She could feel them brushing against her skin, cold and malevolent. As she ran back to the hangar, the ship shuddered violently, the void's power tearing it apart from the inside. Lynn barely made it to the last shuttle, the disruptor weighing heavily on her back. The shuttle launched just as the Explorer was consumed entirely, its hull collapsing into itself as the void devoured it. Lynn watched from the viewport, her heart pounding. "We lost the ship," Calic said grimly. Lynn nodded, her grip tightening on the disruptor. "But we're still alive. And as long as we're alive, we still have a chance." The shuttle sped away into the void of space, carrying with it the last remnants of hope. The shuttle's silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of its engines. The survivors sat in tense quiet, their faces pale and drawn. Lynn stared out of the viewport at the endless expanse of stars, the weight of the void disruptor still pressing against her back. Every decision she had made, every sacrifice, seemed to lead only to further destruction. Calic stood near the cockpit, his broad shoulders hunched as he reviewed their dwindling supplies. "We've got enough rations for 2 weeks," he announced grimly, "and fuel to reach the nearest inhabited system, if it's still standing." That was the unspoken fear hanging over them all, the possibility that the void had spread far beyond what they could imagine. They had no way of knowing if the galaxy still existed as they had known it. Lynn turned to the navigator, a wiry alien named Jex. "What's the closest system with a chance of safe harbor?" Jex tapped rapidly on the console, his 6 fingers blurring with speed. After a few moments he turned, his large eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Caltris Station is within range. It's a trading hub, not heavily defended but far enough from major void outbreaks that it might still be intact." "It's better than drifting aimlessly," Lynn said, pushing herself to her feet. "Set a course." Jex hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. What if it's gone? Like the others?" Lynn's jaw tightened, and she forced herself to meet his gaze. Then we keep moving, one step at a time. The journey to Caltris station felt agonizingly slow. Every shadow in the shuttle seemed to ripple with unseen malice, a cruel reminder of the void's presence. The survivors were restless, their nerves fraying under the constant threat. One night, or what passed for night in the artificial cycle of the shuttle, Lynn found herself alone in the cargo hold, staring at the void disruptor. Its faint blue glow pulsed in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. She reached out a hand to touch it, hesitating just before her fingers made contact. "You don't trust it, do you?" Calic's voice startled her. She turned to see him leaning against the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Trust it?" Lynn let out a bitter laugh. "I don't even know what it is. All I know is that people died to make it, and more people died to bring it here." "And yet, you're still carrying it," Calic said, stepping closer. "Why?" Lynn hesitated, struggling to find the words. Finally, she shook her head. "Because it's all we have left. If this thing can stop the void, even a little, it's worth the risk." Calic nodded, though his eyes lingered on the disruptor with visible unease. "Just don't let it destroy you, too." When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Caltris station, the sight that greeted them was both a relief and a horror. The station was still intact, its ringed structure glinting in the light of its system's twin suns. But the surrounding space was littered with debris, destroyed ships, shattered cargo pods, and the unmistakable remnants of a recent battle. "Looks like they've already had a visit from the void," Jex muttered, his voice tinged with dread. Lynn frowned, her eyes scanning the wreckage. "Get us close, but stay alert. We don't know what's waiting for us." As the shuttle approached the station, they received a transmission. The screen flickered to life, revealing a haggard-looking humanoid woman in a patched uniform. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her voice crackled with static. "This is Caltris station. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Lynn stepped forward. "This is Captain Lynn of the Explorer, or what's left of it. We're refugees seeking shelter." The woman's expression hardened. "We don't have room for refugees. If you've brought the void with you, we'll blow you out of the sky." "We didn't bring it," Lynn said quickly. "We barely escaped it ourselves, but we have something that might help fight it." She motioned to the disruptor, visible in the background. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Is that Terran tech?" Lynn nodded. "It's a void disruptor. Experimental, but it's the only weapon we have." There was a long pause as the woman studied them. Finally, she sighed. "Dock at Bay 12, but if you try anything, we'll vent your ship into space." "Understood," Lynn said, cutting the transmission. The survivors disembarked cautiously, their weapons at the ready. Caltris station was a mess. Its corridors were dimly lit, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt metal and stale oxygen. The station's inhabitants eyed the newcomers warily, their faces gaunt and their weapons always within reach. Lynn and her crew were led to a central chamber where the station's leader, a grizzled man named Oren, waited. He studied them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "You're lucky we're still standing," he said, his voice rough. "The void hit us 3 weeks ago. We fought it off, but we're barely holding together." "We can help," Lynn said, placing the disruptor on the table. "This device is designed to disrupt the void's energy. If we can figure out how to use it, we might stand a chance." Oren frowned, his gaze fixed on the glowing device. "And what's the catch?" Lynn hesitated. "The catch is that it's dangerous. It killed the people who built it, and it might kill us too, but it's better than waiting to die." Oren let out a harsh laugh. "Fair enough. Welcome to Caltris station, Captain. Let's see if your miracle weapon is worth the trouble." Over the next several days, Lynn and her crew worked tirelessly with the station's engineers to integrate the disruptor into Caltris's defenses. But as they worked, the void's presence loomed ever closer. Reports of attacks on nearby systems grew more frequent, each one bringing the dark tide closer to their fragile refuge. The tension reached its breaking point when one of the station's outer sensors picked up an anomaly, a swirling mass of black energy moving toward them. "It's here," Oren said grimly, staring at the sensor readout. Lynn felt a cold knot of fear in her chest. "Then we fight." As alarms blared and the station prepared for battle, Lynn stood at the center of the command deck, the disruptor clutched in her hands. She didn't know if it would work, or if they were all about to be consumed by the same darkness that had taken so many before them. But she knew one thing: they wouldn't go down without a fight. The void approached Caltris Station like a tidal wave of darkness, swallowing the light of the twin suns. On the station's command deck, the tension was thick as Oren, Lynn, and the crew watched the swirling black mass on the holographic display. The edges of the anomaly seemed to ripple unnaturally, as if alive. "All hands to battle stations," Oren barked over the comms. "I don't care what it takes, hold them off." The station came alive with activity. Engineers scrambled to power up the ancient defense turrets mounted on the station's exterior. Pilots readied whatever starfighters were still operational, their engines humming as they lined up in the hangar bays. Civilians, armed with scavenged weapons, fortified the inner corridors, bracing for the worst. Lynn clutched the void disruptor tightly, its eerie glow reflecting off her face. The device felt heavier than before, as if it had absorbed the weight of every life lost to bring it here. She stood with Calic and Jex, who were helping her install the disruptor into the station's central power grid. "Are you sure this is going to work?" Calic asked, his voice strained. "No," Lynn admitted, setting the disruptor into its cradle with trembling hands. "But we don't have any other choice." The disruptor pulsed as it interfaced with the station's systems, its glow intensifying. Jex worked quickly, his fingers flying across the controls as he synchronized the device with the station's energy grid. "I've linked it to the main reactor," Jex said. "But once it's activated, there's no turning back. It'll burn out the reactor, and probably take the station with it." Lynn nodded grimly. "Let's hope we don't have to find out what that looks like." Outside the station, the first wave of void tendrils lashed out, striking the defensive turrets. The turrets fired back, their plasma bolts tearing through the darkness, but the void adapted quickly. Its tendrils split and reformed, absorbing some of the energy and retaliating with devastating strikes. In the hangar bays, the fighters launched in formation, their pilots flying with desperation rather than precision. The first squadron engaged the void's leading edge, unleashing volleys of missiles and laser fire. Some of the attacks hit, creating momentary gaps in the void's mass, but the darkness seemed endless, swallowing the light and pressing forward. "This is hopeless," one pilot shouted over the comms. "We can't—" His transmission cut off as his fighter was consumed, disappearing into the void without a trace. On the command deck, Oren slammed his fist against the console. "We're losing too many people. Lynn, is that thing ready yet?" "Almost," Lynn said, glancing at Jex. 10 seconds, Jex replied, his voice tense. The void was now within striking distance of the station itself. Its tendrils wrapped around the outer hull, crushing sections of the station like a predator breaking its prey. The lights flickered as the void's energy seeped into the power grid, its corruption spreading like a virus. "Activate the disruptor," Lynn shouted. Jex hit the final command, and the void disruptor roared to life. A surge of energy shot through the station, spreading outward in a radiant blue wave. The void recoiled, its tendrils snapping back as the energy disrupted its unnatural cohesion. For the first time, the darkness faltered, retreating from the station's immediate vicinity. Cheers erupted on the command deck as the crew watched the void pull back on the holographic display. But Lynn didn't celebrate. She could feel the disruptor's energy growing unstable, the strain on the reactor pushing it to its limits. "It's working," Calic said, his voice filled with cautious hope. "Not for long," Lynn said. "The reactor can't handle this." The void regrouped, its movements more aggressive than before. It coiled and swirled around itself, as if gathering strength for a final assault. Lynn realized with horror that it wasn't retreating, it was adapting. "It's learning how to resist the disruptor," she said, her voice trembling. "We're out of time." Then we need to hit it with everything we've got, Oren said, stepping forward. If the station goes down, at least we'll take that thing with us. Lynn hesitated, her mind racing. If they overloaded the reactor and channeled the disruptor's energy into a massive pulse, they might be able to destroy the void, or at least a significant portion of it. But it would mean sacrificing the station and everyone on it. Are you sure about this? Lynn asked Oren. He met her gaze, his expression resolute. There's no other way. If we don't stop it here, it'll consume everything. Lynn nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Jex, prepare the reactor for an overload. Calic, help me get the crew to the escape pods. The station descended into chaos as Lynn and Calic led the remaining crew and civilians to the escape pods. The void was relentless, its tendrils punching through the station's hull and dragging people into the darkness. Screams echoed through the corridors as those left behind fought desperately to survive. Lynn reached the last escape pod, shoving a group of terrified civilians inside. Go! She shouted, slamming the hatch shut. What about you? Calic asked, standing at her side. I have to make sure the reactor overload goes through, Lynn said. Get to the pod. I'm not leaving you, Calic said firmly. Lynn looked at him, her resolve hardening. That's an order, Calic. Go reluctantly. He nodded, stepping into the pod. As it launched, Lynn turned and ran back toward the reactor, the void disruptor glowing brighter with each step. The reactor chamber was a scene of destruction. Void tendrils writhed along the walls, and the air crackled with unstable energy. Lynn reached the controls, her hands shaking as she initiated the overload sequence. The disruptor pulsed violently, its energy spiraling out of control. The void surged toward her, sensing the threat, but Lynn held her ground. This is for all of us, she whispered, her fingers hovering over the final command. As the reactor reached critical mass, a blinding wave of energy erupted from the station, consuming the void in a brilliant explosion that tore through the surrounding space. From the safety of their escape pods, the survivors watched as Caltris Station was obliterated, taking the void with it. The dark mass disintegrated, leaving only the silence of the void. But as the pods drifted in the emptiness, Lynn's absence hung heavy over them. She had made the ultimate sacrifice, and although the void was gone, for now, they all knew the cost had been far too high.